Hello YouTube, how's everyone doing? It's Professional here. So today I got a channel update video for you guys. If you guys aren't familiar with these are videos that I upload in which I talk about some future plans of my channel, but I also cover like a specific topic in detail, and we're going to be talking a few more things about retail in this video, which I know a lot of people have wanted me to make a part 2 on this. And I also want to thank everybody who supported me through Super Chat, Super Thanks, channel memberships, and Patreon. They will be up on the screen right now. And I also want to thank my moderators. And I want to thank you guys for helping me to moderate the stream chats. I appreciate it. Thank you everybody who has given me donations. I do really appreciate it. It does help me out a lot, so thank you to everyone. Now, I also wanted to start off this video saying I will be doing a GTA 3 kind of lore video with my friend Blinded Eagle sometime later this month. We don't know on the exact date yet, but when we make that lore video together, I will post a link for you guys. We're going to be doing Yakuza 0, and then like halfway through Yakuza 0, we'll start Ace Attorney, Miles Edgeworth Ace Attorney Investigations, and then in January, we are going to do Mercenaries 1, Max Payne 3, and we're also going to cover the drip feed for GT Online. Now, on today's topic, I want to talk about retail and specifically closing and night shifts, the graveyard shift, and why it is just so destructive, like the terrible experiences that I've had in retail, and chances are you probably have had very similar experiences to this. Now, I made a video nearly a year ago talking about how retail destroyed my mental health, and in that one I talked about customers, horrible management, which I'll go over some of those things here, but I'm going to be talking about other stories, like stories that I did not cover then, because if I kept talking, that video probably could have gone on to 5 hours if I was talking on all of the bad situations that I've dealt with. So if you work in retail before, if you do work in retail, or even if you work in like a restaurant, you can probably relate to a lot of this stuff, and you've probably dealt with this stuff. And also tell me your stories, guys, because I love reading your comments, and I like reading a lot of what you guys have to say about stuff like this. But anyways, what is retail exactly? Again, for people that don't know what retail is any kind of like store that sells merchandise, electronics, furniture, food. Retail is, I guess, a little bit different than supermarkets, but supermarkets are kind of considered retail a lot. Supermarkets mostly focus on food, where retail focuses on all different types of products. So generally, just think of a large store. When we think of retail, we think of generally a large store that sells a variety of products, and like, Walmart is the best example that I can think of retail. I won't be naming the company that I work for, and I won't be naming people by names because I don't want to just bring that up, but I will actually be sending this video to a lot of my coworkers, and they're probably going to remember a lot of this stuff, and they're probably going to appreciate this video too. I'm actually very friendly with some of my coworkers still to this day. They do know about my channel. And so they're probably going to remember a lot of this stuff too. But anyways, I do want to say one positive note is the two, I don't want this video to be all entirely negative, and I will say the two positive things about working in retail, I would say, is that I learned how to do multitasking. So I learned how to multitask. I learned how to do multiple tasks at once. And the second thing is I kind of got used to people. And this can be a bad experience at the same time too, but I saw how people can be very manipulative, and I saw how scummy some people can be. And that opened my eyes, because before that I was very naive. And I thought that, that I didn't think that people were like this, that some people were just, this manipulative and this scummy. But even though it's kind of a bad experience, it is, I think, ultimately a good thing, because it kind of did open my eyes and stop me from being such a naive kid. I started working when I was 19 years old. I started working in 2013, and I quit in 2019. So I worked for about 6 years in retail. So anyways, let's start this off here. Working closing shifts. Now, my store, the store that I worked at, was not a 24-hour store. There was actually discussions for it to go 24 hours, but it never went 24 hours. Now, I worked a lot of times closing shifts because I just really hated the mornings. I was not a morning person. I just usually preferred working closing shifts. So typically my closing shift was either 2 to 10, 3 to 10, or 4 to 10. And I will tell you that for the most part, closing shifts were not that bad at the start, but it was like, I would say, like kind of like halfway through, when you're there, when you start encountering some really insane customers and some really toxic customers. And I will tell you about these customers is the worst kind of customer that you can encounter on a closing shift. And I think that pretty much everybody that agrees with me on this is because whenever I started working, like, closing shifts, usually like the first hour or two, I really didn't experience anything bad happening. But it wasn't until like, it got like, I would say 6 p.m., 7 p.m., 8 p.m., I started encountering really toxic and demanding customers. And I guess a lot of these customers felt that because they were coming in closer to when the store was closing, that they thought that they could make much more of these larger demands. And the number one customer that anybody in retail hates, and it's not just in retail, it's also in the food industry. So if you work in any kind of restaurant, you are going to agree with this 100%. The number one customer that people absolutely hate are last minute shoppers. What are last minute shoppers? Last minute shoppers are people who come in like 5 minutes before the store closes, 1 minute before the store closes. They can even come in 10 minutes before the store closes. If they take their time, they take way too long, they can hold everyone up. And this can even be worse in restaurants. In restaurants, this is even worse, because in restaurants, what will happen is these customers will come in 5 minutes before closing, and they will make some ridiculous order, like some ridiculous complicated order when they've already cleaned all the fryers. The staff have already, put everything away. They're getting ready to close, and then some idiot just walks in like 5 minutes before. And I will tell you something: if you actually confront these customers on this, and you tell them, dude, you're coming in 5 minutes before the restaurant, closes, or you're coming in, 1 minute before the store closes. Why are you doing this to people? They will say, what's your problem? Is the store's open until 10 p.m. Restaurant is open until 10 p.m. So they're supposed to serve me then. Blah blah blah. That's what they will always say. They will always say you're open until 10 p.m. Because I've actually had coworkers that I've actually said to customers, "Sir, we're trying to leave. We're in the middle of something right now. Like, can you please hurry up and bring up your order to checkout?" They will say, the store's open until 10 p.m. That's what they will always say. Even though we give the customers we used to go on the intercom and we would tell the store is closing in about 10 minutes. Please wrap up your shopping and come up to checkout. And eventually corporate told us to stop doing that, because apparently customers were getting offended by that. Customers apparently felt rushed. But you come in a few minutes before the store closes. People want to go home. And I will tell you something, is there are people who will defend this stuff and they will say, oh, you're getting paid, if you stay, longer past 10. Well, I don't care if I'm getting paid or not. I want to go home. I'm exhausted. And sometimes people have to wake up in the morning and they have to do a morning shift. So people want to go home. They want to have something to eat. And then they want to go to sleep and relax. They don't want to be there another hour or two for customers that are shopping. And yes, when people are going to ask me, some people do actually shop an hour still after closing. I have actually seen it. People are ridiculous with this. I will tell you this, the situation that I've had. I've had customers that literally come in like 1 minute beforehand and take like over 40 minutes shopping. And it's gotten so ridiculous that when I was actually closing on the closing shifts, what happened was I would always tell the supervisor, I'm locking the door 1 minute before closing. I would always do that. And the supervisors for most of the time were chill. Like none of the supervisors ever really stopped me from that. They understood because they knew exactly what I was doing. I was trying to prevent the people from coming in the last minute. So what happened was the day before Mother's Day, I felt there were so many people that were coming in the store and they were basically buying like gift cards, and they were buying up envelopes to give to their mothers on the next day, these last minute shoppers. And there were so many people in the store, and then finally we cleared out the entire store, and then I had this bad feeling in my gut, this really bad feeling that a bunch of people were going to come in at the last second. I just had that really bad feeling in my gut, and so I closed the door at 9:59. I was right on that. What happened was like a group of people, like 6 or 7 people, showed up at the door all together at 9:59. And the guy basically says to me, like, what's going on? He sees me right at the door. It's like, let me in. And I tell him, like, sir, the store is closed. And you know what he does? The guy, like, takes out his smartphone. He holds it up to the door, and he's like, nope, it's 9:59. You still gotta let us in. And I was like, oh my god. And so I literally turned around to my supervisor. My supervisor was, like, right behind me, like, the door room area, like, the lobby. And I said to my supervisor, it's like, what do you want me to do? And she said, Pat, just let them in. And I opened the door, let them in, and then they say, thank you, we'll be quick. How long did they take? Over 45 minutes. It's like, oh my god. It's like if you're gonna, look, I get it. That stuff happens. You got last minute emergencies. But if you gotta go to a store literally 10 minutes before closing, you should do your absolute best to literally be as quick as possible so you do not hold people up. Because I'll tell you something, these companies, these retail companies, they constantly stress customer service. You have to be really good customer service, always be professional, be nice to the customers, blah 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 this. But customers should also understand common courtesy. And they should also understand to be respectful to the staff that you go to the store and you buy stuff with them, you interact with them. So the staff that you interact with also have common courtesy and respect and honor. It's a two-way system. The staff aren't the only ones that should be respectful to you. You should also be respectful to the staff. And that means not holding them up, not doing stuff like this. So The last minute customers, I will tell you, are some of the worst, most annoying kinds of people ever. They hold people up, and I've heard horror stories from you guys. Like when I talked about this on live streams, when I looked at the comments on my live streams, I had some of you guys that tell me that you work in the restaurant industry, you work as cooks, you work as waiters, and then you have that idiot that just basically comes in like 1 minute before the restaurant closes to make some ridiculous order, and then you're basically all just prevented from going home. And I will tell you this is when the customer, I don't work in retail anymore. I don't. I haven't worked in retail for over 5 years. And I tell you something, not working in retail for 5 years has greatly improved my mental health. It has. It's like I feel like a lot has just been thrown off my chest. Like I don't have to deal with a lot of this stuff anymore. I'm not dealing with these rude customers every day. But I will tell you something. If I was still working in retail, if I was, and what happened was there was a customer that was still past closing time. They were past closing, and they were refusing to go to checkout. They were still shopping. Do you know what I would personally say? I don't want to get anyone fired, so I don't want anybody to, follow my advice. I don't want to give anyone bad advice, but I'm just telling you what I personally would say. Is I would personally say to the manager, sir or ma'am, I'm going home for the day. I work until 10 p.m. My shift is until 10 p.m. I am going home. That is it. So I have no obligation to be here. You want to be with the customer, you want to follow corporate policy, the customer wait with the customer until they're finished shopping. You stay here, Mr. or Mrs. Manager. I'm going home. And the thing is, these managers in retail, tell you this about them. They are so scummy that literally, if you are like a minute or two late, they will just get on your case. They will explode at you. Where were you? We needed you. We had a line in the store. Why were you a minute late? Why were you 2 minutes late? Or 5 minutes late? Stuff happens. And even when sometimes you text them and you tell them, I'm stuck in traffic right now, there's an accident on the highway, you tell them stuff like this. Yes, most managers are going to be understanding, but then you're going to have the managers that are just going to be absolutely scummy. Now, the first manager that I had did not understand this at all. He was a scumbag about this. The second manager I actually had, this first manager I had from 2013 until mid 2015 was terrible. The manager I had after that, he was a nice guy and he understood most of the time. It was actually the supervisors who were actually a lot of times more rude than the manager even. But the thing is though, is that they expect you to be there right on the dot, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but then at the same time is they expect you to stay later. After for them. So if a customer is doing, last minute shopping, they expect you to stay there. If something, if the job doesn't get finished in retail, if you don't finish stocking or something like that, they expect you to stay after. So literally they expect you to be there right on the dot, but then they expect you to stay after your working hours. So that's personally what I would say. I would say my shift, starts at 3 p.m. It ends at 10 p.m. I'm going home. It is 10 p.m. now. My work is finished for the day. I'm clocking out and I'm going home. That's it. You want to stay with the customer? You do that. You go ahead. And I would tell the customer the exact same thing. If the customer was complaining, I would tell them my shift ends at 10 p.m. and I'm going home. That is it pretty much. If there's like a customer who just basically says, I need to get like, one or two things. I'm really sorry. This is only one time. It's an emergency. Okay. Not a big deal. I understand things happen. You run in the store, you get something, only take 2 minutes. It's not a big deal. But if you're taking, more than like 15, 20 minutes, you're still in the store, you're still shopping at that point, I'm done. I'm going home. I'm not literally waiting for you to finish your shopping spree. I'm going home. And I'll tell you something. I remember one time, there was a lady who came in at 9:58, literally 2 minutes before closing. And do you know what this lady said to me? This lady said that she gave me her smartphone, and she said to me, hey, can you help me with the photo machine? And she's like, I need to print pictures. And we had a photo machine in the store. I was like, oh, sure, ma'am. Because I knew how to use the photo machine pretty well. I was like, how many pictures do you need? And she's like, I need 200 something. I was like, oh my god. Like, I didn't actually hold up like that, like my fans to her like that. But that's basically what I was thinking in my mind. It's like, I was like thinking, this has got to be a troll. This has got to be fake. This can't be real right now. This, oh my god. This honestly can't be real right now. And the thing about that is, what honestly surprised me about this was that this was an older woman. That's what generally surprised me about this. Like, this was probably a woman that was in her maybe late 60s, early 70s. And the reason that I was surprised by that is because from my personal experience working in retail, the older women tended to be the most sweetest, nicest people. It was like, it was like literally grandma, like that was bringing you cookies, like that type of attitude. They were always so sweet. They were always so caring. They never complained. They never really caused a scene. It was actually usually the Karens that were in their 30s to 40s that would actually cause most of the problems. But usually the old women, they were just sweet, like your loving grandma. They would not cause any kind of problems. They were nice. And so like for me, like this was like one of the first times I saw like an old woman that was like, basically pulling one of those things. So I ended up helping her with this. I was like, okay, I'll help her. And what happened was she wanted me to edit every single picture, every single photo. She wanted me to edit individually. And I was like, oh god. But what I did was I got through those 200 something pictures in about 45 to 50 minutes. If you're wondering how the hell did I do that, I basically did like 3 or 4 pictures in a minute. So I would go through it really quickly. I'll tell her, is the color good? Is the size good? What's the size exactly you want? 4x6? Okay, I'm gonna put them all 4x6. Do you want the brightness up? Or do you want the brightness down? I would kind of like rush her through this, and she would say, okay, down, up, do this, down, and it's like good, good, bad, good, good, bad. And so I got for like 3 or 4 pictures every minute. And so I ended up getting through it pretty quickly. And I don't know how, but I did end up getting through all of those pictures done in like 45 to 50 minutes. I did end up doing it. So I got through that. I did all of her pictures, and I was nearly there for an extra hour. And I didn't leave until 11, because at that point I still had to clock out and I still had to get my bag that was in the office. My supervisor at this point, my supervisor was actually just doing work in the office, and they saw exactly what was going on, and they were like, oh god. It was actually a supervisor that I liked working with, but that supervisor that I liked working with, they were a nice supervisor, but the only issue I really had with them is that they were not confrontational customers. So they would never be rude to you, they would never throw extra work on you, they would never expect you, like, to go above and beyond. But what happened was they never really stood up to customers. They didn't really like confrontations, which, to be fair, nobody likes confrontations, but sometimes you gotta tell a customer, it's like, sir, ma'am, we've been here for nearly an hour. We have to go to, we have a morning shift, or we want to go home to our families. We don't want to be here any longer. We will help you with the rest of your pictures here, but the rest, you got to come back and do tomorrow. That's the way you're supposed to do it. My supervisor just wished that she would have come down from the office, and I wish that she would have just said something to the manager. But what happened, wish she would have said something to the customer, my mistake there. But I will tell you something. When I was actually in the middle of doing her pictures, I was actually thinking at the same time, I was thinking, maybe there's some good that can come out of this. And I was thinking, and you're probably thinking, what good can possibly come out of this, professional? What I was thinking is, I had the corporate number memorized in my head. And so what I did was, I took her receipt after I rung her up for all the photos, and I wrote down the corporate number on her. And I was like, ma'am, if you have, 5 minutes, could you please call this number if you get a chance and just tell them that I give you fantastic customer service? It would mean a lot to me and would really help me out. And that corporate number, customers could, call and, give us reviews and stuff like that. And about the reviews is, the reviews oftentimes would not result in a raise, but it would look better for us, and we would get more likely to be able to get these kind of like points. We kind of had like this point system where we log into the portal, and we would be able to like redeem things like gift cards and stuff like that to the store. So the manager would be able to reward us for that, but a lot of times the manager wouldn't even, bother putting in the points. But I was thinking at least maybe something will come out of this. Maybe I get a good, a good review, that when my promotion comes up later this year, we can go back on this and say, look, there's a review here. I stayed with a customer for an extra hour. I helped her edit 200 pictures. I went above and beyond for this customer. Can you do that for me? And you know what the customer says? She says, sure thing, no problem, honey. I will call for you. I'll give you a good review. And I was like, okay, maybe this is a nice old woman after all. Maybe it was just like a bad time. She come in, but okay, she'll help me out. She'll call the corporate number. She'll give me a good review. Guess what happened? Yep, exactly. I know exactly what you guys are thinking watching the video. She never called, did she? Nope, she didn't. She never called, and I kept asking my manager, I was like, did anybody call? Did anybody give me a good review? And I wrote down my name, Patrick, specifically on that receipt. He said nobody called. Nobody called the corporate number. Nobody did. Nobody. And I was thinking, like, seriously, I spent almost an extra hour with you doing 200 pictures, and you couldn't even bother to take 5 minutes to actually call and give me a good review. I went above and beyond for you. Like, seriously? That's just like, oh my god, it was just disgusting. It was just, I honestly felt betrayed. I don't know, maybe I shouldn't have felt betrayed, but I felt betrayed that I worked so hard for this lady. I spent an extra hour doing her entire photo order, and other people, they probably would have taken over an hour to do the photo order, but I was quick through it. I got through it quick. I took care of her order, got her out of there as fast as I could. Still took 45, 50 minutes, but I tried as hard as possible, and what ended up happening is, yep, she never even called for me. It's just, man. But I will tell you guys another thing. Moving on to the next topic, and I'm also speaking from the heart here, guys. I don't have a script or anything for this entire video. The only thing I have is on my computer. I have Notepad open, and on Notepad I just have like an entire like a list of just bullet points of stuff that I just want to go over. And my next point that I wanted to go over is the pharmacy. And I have massive problems with the people in pharmacy. I did, and because we had a pharmacy department in our store. And what happened with the pharmacy department is we had some really nice people that were in the pharmacy. Like one of the head pharmacists that we had, was sometimes a really nice and chill guy, but some of the other times, some of the pharmacists that we had later on were not nice. And a lot of times it was the pharmacy techs that were actually the most rude and the most nasty. Now, the reason that I'm saying this is because what happened is whenever I finished my work, and I didn't have anything else to do, I asked my manager, is there anything else that I can do? My manager's like, you can go help pharmacy if you want. And my manager really never pushed me to help pharmacy, but I knew that it was going to ultimately help the store and was going to make my manager happy. So it kind of was my fault in a way for more going up there to help pharmacy. Now, I was never in charge of medication or anything like that. And one of the reasons that I was actually able to enter the pharmacy, the reason I was actually able to go back there is because what my manager did was my manager did a loophole in order to get me a raise. So basically what happened was, if you guys remember, when I made that video earlier this year, the first manager that I had, that was like, he was a total scumbag. What happened was the last day that he was actually supposed to, that he was working because he was going to another store. I had covered for that manager so many times. I covered for that manager. I tried to talk to that manager, and he would not talk to me that day. He was just ignoring me. He's like, Patrick, I gotta go. And I said to him, I was like, boss, can I please get a raise? And he like looked at me in shock because he's never heard me say that before, because I was always, whatever he told me to do, I would always do that. And this is the first time me actually asking him for something. He was like stunned. And I said to him, like, boss, I know that you're going to leave, in the next 2 days. Can you please, talk to corporate and try to tell them to give me a better raise? Because I've worked really hard for you. Whenever people called out, when people did not show up to work, I covered those shifts. Whenever you needed me, I was there. I took care of stuff. Could you please do something for me? That manager, basically said to me, sure, Patrick, we will talk about it tomorrow. Come in early, we'll discuss it. I came in early that next day, and what happened was I asked where the manager was, and you know what I was told by the supervisor? I was told the manager is not here. He called out on his last day, didn't show up to work on his last day, would not respond to texts, to calls. And the supervisor basically saw that I was in a really bad state. He's actually a friend of mine. And the supervisor saw I was in a bad state. He actually invited me to his wedding, which I do really appreciate. So I'm still really good friends with this guy. He's not a supervisor there anymore, but he was the best supervisor that was there, and he's a really nice guy. My supervisor friend had tried to get in contact with the manager, ended up getting in contact with the assistant manager. The assistant manager told him, take it up with the new manager. The assistant manager was actually a scumbag also. The assistant manager was very friendly with the manager. The assistant manager was also a scumbag, just like the manager. But I do appreciate that, and I never forgot about that, about what he did for me there. But he tried to basically get me a raise there. And now going towards pharmacy, moving on. I talked about this earlier this year, so I don't want to go into this topic again, but about the pharmacy. The reason that I was able to enter the pharmacy is because when my new boss came in, the better guy, I basically explained the situation to him, and I told him about this exact situation, about what had happened. And what happened is the manager told me, Pat, there's no way for me to give you a raise directly, but what I can do is I can give you a promotion. And the promotion is to pharmacy cashier. And if I give you that promotion, you will get, an instant raise, but you don't have to work in pharmacy. I will never assign you to pharmacy. You have my word on that. You will only work in front store. So he basically promoted me without giving me any extra tasks. And I really appreciated that manager. He did a good job. I really appreciate that he did that for me. But he basically appointed me as pharmacy cashier, and I never had to work in pharmacy. He never made me work in pharmacy. I never had to actually work back there. But when I did actually go back there to help pharmacy, it wasn't actually work there. It was never to ring or anything like that. When I would go back there to pharmacy, it was primarily to pick up throwbacks. What throwbacks were is they were items that customers did not want. So basically what would happen is, like, customers would go up to pharmacy, they would bring up a bunch of stuff with them, and what would happen is, like, you know what? I don't want this anymore. And then they were like, here, put it away. And then what pharmacy would do is they would put this stuff in baskets, and it would just pile up. And they would have so many throwbacks. This was like stuff that they had to put in their aisles. And I went back to pharmacy. And whenever I went back to pharmacy, and I would take all these baskets, I would take these baskets and I would put all the stuff away. So I basically clean out all under their table. So all this mess they had of all this random stuff, all this random junk that was in the store. Whenever I finished my task, I put all that stuff away. And I took care of it, and they thanked me a lot for this. And there was people, pharmacy techs, that were nice to me there. The pharmacist at times thanked me too. But then there was other pharmacy techs that I had more of a problem with. And what happened is, the reason that I had an issue with them was because the people that were the most dirtiest in the entire store were pharmacy. And you would literally not believe that, but they were. Is like some of the people that worked in pharmacy were the most dirtiest people. And you would think that somebody who works in the pharmacy would be as clean as possible. They were never clean, but they were never dirty behind the pharmacy, to be fair. But when they were in the break room, oh man, it was a completely different story. One time when I went down to the break room, I had my lunch bag down there. And I went and I sat down in the break room. And when I sat down in the break room, I opened up my lunch bag. Do you know what I saw in my lunch bag? So many ants. Ants crawling all over my food. Everywhere. And then what happened was I saw the ants. They were on me, on my shirt. They were on my leg. And I just stood up and I was like, oh, this. Like, I was just like that. I was just like, oh my god. It was like just trying to get them all off. And I was like looking around. I went to the bathroom. I looked around the mirror, make sure there's no more ants on me. It just freaked me out. It scared the crap out of me. I will be honest with you guys. It honestly scared the crap out of me. It terrified me. Like, you know, stuff like that. I don't want to act like a baby here, but it did. Like, just that many ants on me. And the reason that there were so many ants, where did these ants all come from, is because people in the pharmacy that would eat in the break room were so dirty. What would happen is, there'd be like a half-eaten pizza slice. It would fall on the floor. They wouldn't clean it up. The garbage would get full. They would not bother to take it out. They would put some kind of food in the microwave, and the food would explode, and it would go over the microwave. They would never clean any of this stuff. We cleaned this up in front store. We cleaned it up. And whenever we confronted pharmacy, and we told pharmacy, you know, why can't you guys actually clean this stuff up? Why can't you do stuff like this? They would always say, it's not my department. It's not my department. That is front store's job. And their attitude, the way that some of these pharmacy guys, these pharmacy techs and the pharmacists, the way that some of these guys were thinking is they're basically thinking, oh, I went to some fancy, you know, school to become a pharmacy, you know, work as a pharmacy tech, whatever else is. I don't have to do stuff like this. Stuff like this is beneath me. This is basically for the front store workers. I don't give a crap if you went to Harvard, Yale, whatever else. I don't care what school you went to. I don't care if you are the smartest person in the world. I don't care. Even the smartest person in the world has the common decency to clean up after themselves. You don't make a mess in the break room, leaving food all over the place like a half-eaten apple on the table, and you don't throw it out. Common decency. Anybody can take a garbage bag, roll it up, take it, throw it to the dumpster. Anybody can do that. Just because we work in front store and we make less money than you, we don't have all this fancy education at you, does not mean that you can't do stuff like this also. Common courtesy is you clean up after yourself also. And that's why I sometimes hated interacting with pharmacy. I still ended up helping out pharmacy even after a lot of that stuff. I still ended up helping them out. And the reason for that is because there was pharmacy techs that I worked with that I actually liked. And some of those pharmacy techs and those pharmacy cashiers, they came up to help us out when we needed it. But there was other people in pharmacy that I really didn't like. And I did not get along with them. I just did not like them. And I remember one time, which basically, it was one of the first times that I actually stood up for myself, because I didn't know how to stand up for myself. I didn't. And what would happen is, my dad would always tell me, my father always told me that my biggest problem in life is I didn't know how to tell people no, and people would roll all over me. It's kind of true. Is I didn't know how to tell people no, and basically people would constantly take advantage of me, and they would make me do stuff that wasn't supposed to be my responsibility. But I remember one time, I got called to the pharmacy, and I was kind of strange because I usually don't get called to pharmacy. I instead just go back there and ask them if they need help with something, but this time they actually called me to the back of pharmacy. And what happened was, there was this big orange puddle that was like right in front of pharmacy, and I was like, what the hell is this? Like, it's this orange goo that was on the floor. And the pharmacist told me, oh yeah, Pat, a customer vomited. We want you to clean that up. And I was like, excuse me? Yeah, we want you to clean it up. And you know what I said to him? At that point, just basically something snapped in my head. And I was like, enough is enough. I get paid a little bit over minimum wage. I don't get paid to clean up people's vomits. And I basically walked away. And I said, this is not my department. What basically they would say, whenever you confronted the pharmacy people who were just careless with their food, they would say, that's not my department. I said the exact same thing. I said, it's not my department. I'm not cleaning it up. I'm not getting paid enough for this. I'm not doing this. And I walked away. And what happened was, I had this one supervisor. And this one supervisor, she was really strict, but I liked her. She was a really good supervisor too. And the reason that I liked her, because even though she was strict, she got in your case for doing your work. She never threw extra work on top of you. So she never gave you responsibilities that were not your own. And if you needed her help, she was there to back you up if you needed her help. So even though she was strict, she would always back you up. And I learned that that's one of the most important life experiences that I learned, is that people that are strict are not always bad people. Sometimes the people that are strict actually want the best. For everyone. So they're not bad people. They're just, I would say, they're just probably, the way I would describe strict people is they're just a little bit more harsher in their tone, but they're not necessarily bad people. That's just what I would say about it. And so that supervisor, I worked with her. She was strict, but she always had my back. Whenever she needed something done, I got it, and she would have my back for that. And a lot of times she would just let me, and whenever I finished all my work, she would just let me sit on my phone. So, she didn't, make me do anything else. She told me to sit away from the camera so they don't see me, but that's what she let me do. So whenever I finished all my work, she didn't throw any extra stuff on me. But anyways, about her is, she asked me, why did they call you to pharmacy? And I told her that pharmacists want me to clean up vomit. And she's like, they want you to do what? And she literally went back there and was screaming and dropping F-bombs, and I heard that across the I heard that across the store. It was literally, I heard it across the store. That was just, and I'll tell you something, is that when somebody pissed her off, when somebody's doing, she would be able to really you know, really go off on somebody, and that pharmacist deserved that. That pharmacist deserved it. I've never been more happy to see somebody get screamed at. Never been more happy for that. So that pharmacist really deserved that after just that type of crap. But she told me, like, don't bother, don't go back there cleaning up, they will do it. So basically is she, you know, she hated behavior like that. So like I said, she was strict, but she was caring and honest, and she absolutely despised behavior like that. Like the pharmacist trying to make like a, you know, a minimum wage worker like clean up vomit in front of his you know, in front of his counter is ridiculous. It's like, if you can't clean up your food in the break room, and that's not your department, then cleaning up in front of pharmacy is not my department either. You take care of it, Mr. Pharmacist. But like I said, there were some people in pharmacy I liked, some of the techs, some of the cashier, but there was other people I didn't like, and some, because we had a bunch of different pharmacists. Some of the pharmacists I liked, some of them I didn't. But anyways, going on to the next thing, when dealing with closing shifts, one of the things that I absolutely hated is I hated on Saturday nights. On Saturday nights, I dealt with kids that would come in, and these kids would constantly have fake IDs, and they would try to buy alcohol. And I would tell you, these kids, when they were buying alcohol, they were not even buying like, you know, a 6-pack of beer. They were buying like the giant packs of beer, like two or three packs of them. Like they was really carrying like truckloads of this stuff. And so you knew that the IDs were fake, because what would happen is the IDs were all out of state. So I'm from New York State. That's where I was working. It was in New York State. And these IDs, they were like Pennsylvania IDs, New Jersey IDs, trying to think of the other ones, Delaware, Delaware, and I've seen a few Californias that were fake also. Those were the red flags. It was Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania was almost always the red flag. I don't know why Pennsylvania was such a common fake one, but it was Pennsylvania was the most common one that I saw. This is like around 10 or 9 years ago too. So remember that. So I don't know if the Pennsylvania's IDs have changed at this point, but it was Pennsylvania was the one that was the most fake. And the thing is, though, is that the easiest way to tell that these IDs were fake is all you basically got to do is you just got to ask them what their address is. So when you ask them for their ID when they're buying alcohol, you just ask them what their address is. What's your address? And the address is oftentimes some fake address that they don't even have memorized, and they can't even tell you it. And the second thing you can ask them is you can ask them who their governor is. So when they have like a Pennsylvania ID, like, I don't know, it's like, you don't know who the governor is? Like, pretty much everyone knows who the governor is in their state. So it's like, they don't know who that was my favorite question, is asking who the governor was, or, you know, asking them their address. But the thing is, sometimes some of these kids, they have memorized the address. So sometimes the address they were practicing in their mirrors, they literally knew this address. They literally knew it. They were practicing on it, and they had that just already. And I will tell you is, for people wondering, you know, I know people are, you know, watching this and they're thinking, like, professional, what's the big deal? You know, if you ask them for ID, and even if they show you a fake ID, it's not really your responsibility to go through this stuff. Well, it kind of is, because there's something called strict liability laws. Now, for people that don't know what a strict liability law is, in an American court of law, in order to prove that somebody had committed a crime, you have to demonstrate both mens rea and actus reus. Now, these are Latin terms. Actus reus means a guilty act. Mens rea means the guilty state of mind. And so you have to prove that somebody has a guilty act, and that they're committing a guilty act, and they have a guilty state of mind, meaning that they're planning to do this. But strict liability crimes are unique because they are crimes that somebody commits without having that criminal state of mind, that they have no planning. And basically what this means is strict liability laws are basically when you commit crimes without realizing that you committed a crime. So you commit a crime without realizing you're committing a crime. So basically, if you sell alcohol, in a lot of places, if you sell alcohol to somebody who has a fake ID, and then a cop pulls them over, and the cop finds that fake ID, and they find the receipt, and they go back to your store, they could arrest you. That's it. I know it varies state by state, but that is a real thing. That is a real thing. I learned about this when I was studying law in school as well, and a lot of my police officer teachers and my detective teachers warned us about this. That if you're ever working in a store that sells alcohol, if you sell, you know, alcohol to somebody who has a fake ID, you could end up getting arrested. I know people are thinking that's stupid. That's how are you supposed to prove that? You can't really all the time, and that's what I'll say is that it's just frustrating. It's frustrating dealing with this stuff. And these kids, they would constantly put up an attitude. They were annoying. And I will tell you about this, is that these kids, I had this one supervisor that I worked with that was really lazy, lazy, and he was really annoying, which I'll talk about him a little bit later. But even though he was really lazy and he was really annoying and he did a lot of bad things, he was more of a bad supervisor and a good supervisor. The only good thing that I remember him doing is that when these kids got aggressive, because sometimes these kids, when you wouldn't sell these kids alcohol, and you would tell them, I'm sorry, I can't, you can provide me like the second form ID, they would get pissed off. It's like, what, my ID not good enough for you? And they would like stand there, like make a scene. Instead of like going to the next store, they would stand there and make a scene. My supervisor actually ended up calling the cops on them. So we warned them a few times, leave, and they left, but then other times they would come back. And the thing is about this is these kids were so stupid that they would literally come in one day with their fake IDs, they would get rejected, and then they would come in a second day. Like the next week, the exact same time, next week, Saturday night, it was like around 7 or 8 p.m., they would come in over and over again. So they got rejected, told, don't try this again, and they would just come back in the exact same place. It's like stupid. It's like literally, it's like their brains are not processing. It's like you got kicked out of this place, but you're coming back here. And so after these kids basically got told not to come back, they still came back, and the supervisor at that point called the police on them. Now what happened was, the police, when the police arrived, the police actually stopped the kids when they were actually walking out like the door room, and what the police officer did was the police officer took their fake ID from them, and the police officer, remember, ran it through some kind of scanner. He did some kind of test, and he said that it passed the test, but the ID was fake. So the IDs, the fake IDs were so well done that they were even passing the police test, whatever the test of the police. That's what the cop said, that it passed his test, but it was still a fake ID. So what the cops would do, the cops would take away the fake IDs, and then they would warn these kids. And do you know what these dumb kids did? These dumb kids came back like 2 weeks later, again, Saturday night. It's like, oh my god. It's like, how effing stupid are you? Excuse my language. But literally that is how stupid these kids were. And these kids, if you're wondering, these kids were like 16, 17, 18, 19-year-olds. That's how old they were. So they were like late high school kids. And it's like, how stupid are you? The police were called. You were banned from the store. They were literally, took away your fake IDs. And they had new fake IDs. Like 2 weeks later, and they came in the store. Oh my god, it's like, how stupid are you? You come back to the exact same place, but they did. It's like, all they think about is drinking, drinking, and drinking. I wouldn't be surprised they're alcoholics. All that they don't even process through their minds, that they literally got kicked out of this place, and then they're coming back. And what happened was the police got called yet again. I wasn't the one who called the police, by the way, but the police got called yet again. And do you know what happened? When the police came by, the police basically took their IDs, and they warned them. And that was it. Second time again. And literally I was getting pissed at that point, and I was getting pissed at the police too. I was getting annoyed at them. Now look, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying for the police to arrest these kids. I wasn't saying that. I'm not saying the police should put them in handcuffs and take them to jail. That's not it. But what the police should have done is the police, to really scare these kids, is they should have got their parents involved. That was the problem. Because literally, when you're a high school kid, when a cop threatens to call your parents, that's the worst fear that they can put into a kid. And that's really what the police should have done. Is the police should have driven them home, taken them to their parents' house, and so showed them the IDs and said, look, this is what your kid is doing. He's coming into the store with fake ID and trying to purchase, beers. And those kids would have never done it again. But nope, the cops don't even do that. They don't even call the parents. They don't even, do anything. So like I said, I'm not saying to arrest the kids, but they should at least call the parents, told them, this is what your kids are doing. But guess what ended up happening is, like 2 months later, one or 2 months later, those kids showed up again to the store again, the same place again. They came in with fake IDs like the third time in a row. And when these kids came in with the fake IDs, they came in this time on a Saturday, the same time, same day, but not the same time. They came in earlier in the daytime this time. So they came in, I remember I was working more of a midday shift. I remember I started at I think it was 10 or 9 a.m. is when I started, and I was supposed to leave at 6 or 5 p.m. And they saw me. They saw me there. They were trying to buy beer at that place, and basically, they when they saw me at the cash register, they were looking like this, like they knew exactly that I was gonna reject them. They knew exactly what was coming, and what ended up happening was they still, even after that, they didn't even bother to stop just to walk out. They literally still tried to buy beer from me again, and I was getting pissed. I was like, these kids have no thought process whatsoever, and you have to be a real narcissist and a real arrogant person in order to be able to do stuff like this. Lily, how many times have you been banned from this place, and you've gotten your IDs, confiscated, 2 times now at this point, and you're still doing it? But basically what happened was, I had a supervisor that came up, and the supervisor was, they were busy in the middle of doing work. This supervisor was not necessarily rude, but if you interrupted their work, they got a bit pissed at you. And the supervisor, said to me, Patrick, what's the problem here? And I didn't want to blurt out that the IDs were fake, and I had told the supervisor, can you please look at this? Can you look at this? And what ended up happening was the supervisor was like looking at it, like, what's the problem exactly? What's going on here? And what ended up happening is I said, I'm not ringing them up. I'm not doing this. And, walked away. The supervisor rang them up, and then they came over to me, and they started arguing with me. What's your problem? Why can't you help the customers and stuff like that? And I told them, like, do you realize what you've done? And they say, what? And I say, those kids are underage. They came in here with fake IDs. They've been banned from here multiple times. There's literally a picture of them up in the office. And you literally just sold underage kids, alcohol with the fake ID. And you know what they told me? They told me, how can an ID be fake? That's what they said. How can an ID be fake? And I was like, this. People have been faking IDs since ancient civilization times. So even in ancient civilization times, they still had forms of IDs. They obviously didn't have pictures, but they had like documents and other like tablets and stuff like that that gave people information on the person. But people have been fake ever since IDs have existed, since ancient civilizations. People have been faking them, and they still fake them to this day. Documents have always been fake. It's always been a thing. So I was like, how can you not realize this? And the thing about that supervisor is that supervisor was not a bad supervisor. They were helpful a lot of times too, but it was just that instance they were just, oh man, it was just bad. But after that, I never really saw those kids again. So that was pretty much it. Now, next thing I want to talk about here is I want to talk about how basically nothing ever stops customers. And what I mean by this is nothing ever stops customers is that one thing that I learned about working in retail is that nothing will stop these people. Nothing. If they want to go to the store, if they want to shop, nothing is going to stop them. It could be a blizzard outside. It can be a flood. It can be a tornado. Nothing is going to stop them. Now, you think that I might be exaggerating, but some of these people are just like that. If you work in retail, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Even the harshest weather will not stop some people. Now, when there's really bad weather outside, you're going to have a drop in customers. It's obviously going to happen. However, though, there are people who will just still come to the store. No matter what, they will come to the store, even if it's the worst type of weather outside, they will still come to the store. And I remember one time that I arrived at the store when there was a snowstorm. And I didn't live very far from the store. I lived maybe like, I would say 10 minutes drive from the store. But I arrived at the store and it was snowing. Now, after a few hours, the snow had gotten worse. I don't know if you would call it a blizzard, but it was getting really bad. And it was like snow was, falling at a more rapid pace, and it was windy. It was blowing wind around all over the place. And what happened was I went on break. And during my break, what I did was I wanted to get some of the snow off of my car. So I threw some of the snow off of my car. I was clothed up. I remember I had like this a big bandana on my face that I would actually wear when it was like windy. So like the wind and the snow wouldn't really bother me. But I got all the snow off of my car because I knew that there was going to be so much snow that was going to pile up later and it was going to freeze and it was going to be worse. So I got some of that off my car. I sat in my car, got my lunch bag. I was eating. And as I was eating, I turned on like the heater and the heat on the windshield. So this is just my car would get a little heated up because my shift was going to end in like 2 or 3 hours. And one thing I noticed is the parking lot was mostly empty. But then I see like one car pull up in the parking lot when it was just like such bad weather outside. And I was like, what? I was like, who is this? And what I see is like a guy get out of the car, and I'm assuming this guy was a dad, and he gets his child out of the car. And the child is, I don't know, maybe like 6, 7, 8 years old. That's how old the child was. Now, what the dad did is that the child did not want to go outside. They didn't want to. And the dad was like pulling the child by the hand, just like that. This wasn't like a kidnapping or anything like that. This was the dad. And I even talked to the supervisor later on, and they told me they recognized the customer and the child, so it wasn't like some kind of kidnapping or anything, but it was that the child just did not want to go out in that weather. Like, they wanted to stay in the car. They did not want to go out like that windy, because it's like so windy and the snow is blowing all over the place. But the dad dragged the child, like pulled him by the hand and was like dragging him through that. So this child ended up following the dad into the store, was clearly uncomfortable, just did not want to be in this terrible weather outside. And I was like thinking, I was like, why did this guy, bring his child in this terrible weather? What was the reason exactly? What was the reason? Do you know why he dragged his child through the snow, through that terrible thing? To buy cigarettes. That's what he did. He bought a pack of cigarettes, and that's the only thing he bought at the store, a pack of cigarettes. And I was thinking, my God, I was just so pissed at that guy. I don't know if this was the dad. I don't know if this was the dad or this was like a really older brother. I don't know who this guy was. This was obviously some kind of relative to the child, but the manager told me he's seen the guy with the child before, so they have to be related. But the thing about this just pissed me off so much, is that you're gonna drag your younger brother or your son through this terrible weather so that you can get a pack of smoke? Seriously? Toughen it out. You know, wait until the weather gets better. And look, you can't leave a child in the car by themselves. I get that too. But you shouldn't have even driven to the store at all. Like, you know, why are you coming to the store, you know, dragging this child through this terrible weather? Clearly doesn't want to be outside in this. And you're dragging them through this harsh weather so you can have a pack of cigarettes, so that you can have your smoke? Seriously? Disgusting. It's like, go buy your cigarettes another day. Wait until the storm dies down. It's like, toughen it out. My God. It's like, you know, I can't imagine dragging a child through like weather like that. I would think it would be some kind of emergency, like medication or something that you need, but just to buy a pack of cigarettes, it's like, oh man. And speaking of the cigarettes, I will tell you this, is I hated when we sold cigarettes or when we sold alcohol to people, because what would happen is we would have to ask people for their IDs. And what the managers always told us is, the managers told us that if the person looks, you know, older, I think it was like when they look over like 35 or 32, 33, whatever it was, like their mid-30s, is like, don't ask them for ID. But if they look younger than that, ask them for the ID. And some people, they look a lot younger. Some people's ages don't match their physical appearance. That's basically what I'm getting at here. And what happened was, there were some people that I wasn't sure how old they were. I wasn't sure. And I would ask them for their ID, and they will get so offended. They will get so pissed. And it'd be like, why do I gotta get my goddamn ID out? It's like, enough of this BS. I gotta deal with this. It's like people just yelling at me, like, you know, making such a big deal. And it's like, seriously, dude, is it that big of a deal to just pull out your wallet, just get your ID out? It's gonna take you less than a minute, probably less than 30 seconds if you're quick. And I just punch in the date, that's it, you're out with your cigarettes and you're out with your alcohol. Why is it such a big deal? And a lot of these guys, these guys were overage, but like, I wanted to be sure. I wanted to be 100% sure. But it was like, why are they making such a big deal? And so that's why sometimes I hated asking people for their IDs. I never like, you know, I never skirted the issue. I never like ignored it. So when I felt I needed to ask for ID, when I felt that the person was too young, I would always ask for the ID. But I hated it sometimes because people would give me such an attitude when I'm just doing my job, and they would just be such a, you know, it's like, I'm just following the law. It's like, you know, being such a, you know, scumbag. And then I will tell you also, I do remember this other instance where there was this one coworker that I worked with, and she actually ended up getting fired later on for stealing, and she was really rude and nasty a lot of times. But one thing that she was actually right on is there was a customer who came in, and there was like a really bad snowstorm. This wasn't the same instance with that guy and the child. This was a different instance. There was a really bad snowstorm. And what happened was this, a lone car pulled into the parking lot. Like, we saw the lone car just pull into the parking lot from the store's windows. And because right behind the counter was actually a window to the outside, which you could actually see. And so we see that, like, there's no cars in the parking lot. There's like a single car that just pulls up. And there's a guy who literally buys a pack of gum. He walks in the store, he buys a pack of gum, he doesn't even get cash back or anything, just buys a pack of gum, that's it, and just starts walking out. And my coworker, she says to him, "You're an idiot, aren't you?" Like, she says to the guy. And, like, the guy stopped for a second, he, like, looked, and then he just walked out. And that was it. Maybe she shouldn't have made that comment, but was, like, thinking, like, you're gonna drive through this terrible storm just to buy a pack of gum? It's like that. Like, when I see, like, a single car pulling up when it's, like, you know, freezing conditions, when it's, like, a super bad snowstorm outside, I'm assuming that this person's coming in for some kind of, you know, some kind of emergency, some kind of food that they need, medication, you know, something like that, that they're not coming in for, you know, buying a single pack of gum. If they were coming in for just cash back, I would have understood it more. So I wouldn't have used that term. I wouldn't have necessarily called him an idiot. But it's, like, thinking, like, why would you come through, like, that type of bad weather in that? And next thing that we're moving on to, because we got still a lot to cover on here, sales signs. So about sales signs is I worked on sales signs every single Saturday night. And Saturday night is when we would get the sales signs in. We would get them in actually earlier, but Saturday night is when we would work on them. Now, sales signs, we had them in this booklet, and we would rip the booklet out, and then we would attach all the smaller signs. So, like, you know those small little tags when you go down the aisle and there's like a bunch of them? Those are the sales signs I'm talking about, like those small little skinny tags like this big, and we had like thousands of them. And so they would have to be ripped out of the book, they would have to be organized or rubber banded. And what happened was, I would do these signs because I was really quick. I had all the aisles memorized, I knew where everything went, and so when it came to the sales signs, I could just go through it like that. Like, I was super quick. I knew where all of that stuff was. So if I had like the entire store to myself, if I did not get interrupted, if customers did not interrupt me, I could finish the entire store in just one night. So all the signs, I could do thousands of signs in just one night. If I did not get interrupted, I could do everything super quick. That's how fast I was. So literally is I was so fast the signs, I could probably do yeah, I could probably do like, you know, 100 or more signs in like less than 10 minutes. I know it might sound insane, but they're all just right next to each other. So it's like literally I would just be like that. I would just be super quick. I remember I had a number on the sign. I would look at the number on the shelf. I would just see the number. It would just click in my head, and I would just get it and I'd get it done. Now, why is this relating to the bad retail experience? Because I had a really bad supervisor that worked with me, really bad one. And this is the guy I was talking about earlier, the guy who called the police and the kids. And that was probably the only thing I probably agreed with him on, because after the kids got banned from the store and they kept coming in and getting aggressive. But other times the guy was a really bad supervisor. He never really screamed at you. He never really yelled at you. But the reason that he was a really bad supervisor is because he was extremely lazy, and he would throw his tasks on top of you. And so he was a nice guy when you talked to him, but he was a massive scumbag. And that's what another important lesson that working in retail has taught me, that people that are nice are not always necessarily the best to have in that position. And so he was nice, but he was a massive scumbag, because what would happen is, if he was your supervisor, he would assign you tasks that were not your responsibility. So when he would give you like a list of tasks to do, he would put on his tasks on there. And then what he would do is he would go up to the office and eat Doritos. I am not joking. That is literally what he would do. Go up to the office and just eat Doritos. And so a lot of times there's this stereotype. There's a stereotype in retail that supervisors and managers are just sitting up in the office and just doing absolutely nothing but just sitting on their phones. And to an extent, it is true. I'm not saying every supervisor is like that. I worked with supervisors that are probably going to watch this video. I'm going to send this to my coworkers that were just great people, and I respect them. They worked hard. But there was other supervisors and managers who did absolutely nothing. And they would just, you know, just be in the office, and they would just be doing nothing, sitting on their phones. Like my first manager, the scumbag I was telling you guys about, he ran a lumber business, and he was also manager at that store. And he did not care at all about the store. He would instead get on our cases, and he would be on his phone managing his lumber business. And what he would do is he would constantly get on our case and say, because you're not doing your job correctly, I'm not going to get my yearly bonus. Like, yeah, we should care about your yearly bonus. Where's our yearly bonus? But that was the way that the manager was. So this supervisor, specifically, he wasn't a manager, this was a supervisor, not I'm talking about, different guy. He would, you know, constantly make you do his work. So he had a list of tasks, constantly make you do his work. And the worst part about it is that he would make you stay very late. And I'm not talking an hour afterwards. I'm talking 2 to 3 hours. That's how long he would make you stay after your shift. And you're probably thinking, why? Why that long exactly? What he would do is, when I was doing the sales signs every Saturday night, I worked with him. And I worked with this other guy. The other coworker I worked with, he was not a supervisor. He was just my coworker. He's another store associate. About him is, this guy was, I would describe him as a narcissist, this one of my coworkers, because he thought the world revolved around him. He thought that he was the most important thing. He thought that every single bad thing that he went through was the most important thing. He didn't care about anybody else's experiences. He only cared about himself. He would constantly demand you help him, but he would never help anybody else. This is, you know, another one of my coworkers. So I had worked with that guy and the lazy supervisor, and it was a recipe for disaster. That guy, that supervisor would make me do his work, and then that guy, my coworker, would get me to do work with him. So he would like constantly get, Pat, I need help over here. And he was always never like, it was never like, Pat, can you please help me with this? Like, Pat, I need help over here. That's what he would always say. And the thing is, though, is whenever you called that coworker over for help, it was always some kind of excuse. Oh, I can't right now. I'm busy. I'm doing something. But nope, you always needed to help him. So what happened was, that's lazy supervisor. He would do everything in his power to sabotage me. And I am fully convinced in my mind, you cannot convince me otherwise, he was intentionally trying to sabotage me. He was trying to do it on purpose, to try to prevent me from doing my work. And you're probably wondering, why would the supervisor prevent you from doing your work? The reason he was preventing me from doing the sales signs is because he knew how quick I was. And he knew that if I didn't get in, if I wasn't interrupted, I could do the entire store in one day. And that means if I finish the entire store on time, he would have no excuse to stay later. The reason that he would prevent me from doing, the reason he would sabotage me and keep me from doing my work is because he would make me do his work. It would look better on his part, worse on me because I didn't finish the sales signs. And then he would tell me, Patrick, he would come down at 10 o'clock. I remember, Patrick, because we didn't finish all the work, we have to get it done. We have to stay here until all the signs are done. So then he would stay like another hour or two afterwards. The longest he's ever kept me was like 3.5 hours. That's the longest that he's ever kept me afterwards. But he would basically keep me hours afterwards. And what happened, that one coworker that I talked to you guys about, that really narcissistic guy, he would make such a big deal. Every single night, he would say, well, because Patrick didn't finish his signs, like, you know, now we have to stay later, blah, blah, blah. And he would make such a scene. And what the supervisor would do is the supervisor would just basically tell him, okay, fine, you can go home, and just open the door and let him go home. And then I had to stay. And I had to stay with the supervisor and finish the work, and I would be stuck there for another, like, hour or two afterwards. And this happened probably more than 30 times. I'm not exaggerating. This happened that many times. It would always hit 10 o'clock, the supervisor would make me do his work, and then that, you know, narcissistic coworker that I had, he would make a big deal. He would say, you know, Patrick didn't finish the sign. It's not my problem. It's not my responsibility, and make a big deal. The supervisor would let him go, and I stayed. Rinse and repeat every Saturday night like that. It was just a disaster. My parents were like, where the hell are you? Why are you always, like, you know, an hour or two late? And I was explaining, this is the supervisor. He's doing stuff like this. And I didn't know how to stand up for myself. I didn't know how to say, I should be going here. Like, you know, I work until 10. I didn't know how to stand up for myself. And if I asked the supervisor to actually come down and help me with stuff, if I asked him, please, you know, can you please come down and help me with stuff? He would always say to me, you know, I can't right now, Patrick. I gotta do some paperwork in the office. Always that excuse every single time. And what happened is, what finally kind of, when he finally crossed the line, is that I was working, we had 3 people working and the supervisor, so we had 4 people working that day. And the other 2 of my coworkers that I worked with were nice people, you know, a guy and a girl, both really nice people. They were some of the best workers that I worked with. They had my back, I had their back. We would work together great as a team. Now, that was not a Saturday night. I don't remember what day that was. The only thing I remember is that it was, I'm pretty sure it was approaching, like, summertime, because I remember they were in college, and they were saying, you know, I have finals, you know, this week, I have finals tomorrow, you know, I can't stay here. So it's been like an hour afterwards, so we're supposed to leave at 10, and he's still making us, like, clean the store, and he's in the office, like, you know, not doing anything, not helping. And so my coworkers, both, the guy and the girl, are saying, we got finals, we gotta do stuff. And I overheard them, like, you know, talking about stuff like this, and I told them, I was like, guys, clock out, and, you know, both go home. I'll take care of it. I'll do your work. And I did that for them because when I needed help, they helped me out when I needed help. So it wasn't just me being, it wasn't just me letting myself get taken advantage. They didn't pressure me. I did this on my own. I told them, guys, you know, go home. I got finals, you know, this week, tomorrow, whenever, because they were saying we got finals soon. I will stay. I will take care of your work. I'll do it. And they were like, you sure, Patrick? I was like, yeah, go, guys. They both clocked out. They left. I let them out. And then he came down on the floor. He's like, where are they? Where did they go? I was like, I let them go. They have finals this week. And he's like, what? Why did you do that? I said, they have finals this week. And then he says, okay, whatever. I'm going back to the office. And then I started doing the work, and he kept me there until like 1:30, like 1:30, 1:20. It was like half into 1 a.m. And what happened is, that guy and that girl that actually went home, they actually texted the manager. And they told the manager that supervisor is holding Patrick up. Like, he's holding Patrick there all night long. And so they did that favor for me. As they talked to the manager, and they said it's not fair that, like, you know, he's holding Patrick there all night long too. And what happened is the manager then talked to him and told him, listen, supervisor, you can't do this stuff. You cannot hold people like this. When it's 10 p.m. and there's no customers in the store, we all go home. And he said, I understand, sir, I understand. And guess what? He started doing it again. Next week, again, holding people up. And what ended up happening is the district manager actually got involved, because he was doing that to milk hours. The reason that he was holding everyone up is he was just doing it to milk hours, just so that he could get overtime. So he would just prevent me from doing my work, and just use that as an excuse so he could go up and sit in the office and just get his overtime pay. It was just such a dishonest thing that I did. I've never seen somebody do something like that, but it's such a scummy thing. You're sabotaging your coworkers just so that you can get overtime pay. It was just absolutely disgusting. Such a scummy thing to do. But the district manager tried to do something about this. And I will say about the district manager, he actually got sued by that supervisor for discrimination. The supervisor actually sued him for discrimination. That's really what he did. He sued him for religious discrimination. That's what he sued him for. And that was, and I will tell you something, it had nothing to do with religious discrimination. I sympathize with anybody that's a victim of discrimination, don't get me wrong, but the district manager getting on that supervisor's case, it had nothing to do with religious discrimination, nothing whatsoever. I knew that supervisor, I knew he was lazy, I knew he was throwing work on other people, he was constantly trying to sabotage me, trying to prevent me from doing work, and then he just used that as basically as an excuse to go after the district manager. But to be fair, at the same time, I didn't feel bad for the district manager getting sued, and the reason I didn't feel bad, even though it was a fraudulent lawsuit, is because that district manager was a scumbag. That district manager, the only reason he was intervening, he wasn't intervening to protect us workers that were getting held up there. He was only intervening because the guy was just constantly milking overtime and taking money away from the company. That's why, so he could care less about the workers. That district manager was so toxic that what happened is, he would come into the store for his monthly inspection, and when he came into the store for his monthly inspection, what happened was he would talk to us, he would like, the store looks great, guys, you guys are doing an amazing job, he would tell that to us on the floor, and then like an hour later, he would send the manager and the supervisors like emails, and he would just basically say the most vulgar, disgusting crap ever in those emails. He would just say, you guys don't know what the F you're doing, you guys gotta get your crap together, the store looks like shit, excuse my language, so that's what he said. It's like, you guys better get on your asses and do all this stuff, or you're getting effing fired. That's what he would say. So he's like Mr. Two-Face, basically what he was. The district manager would come in, say, you guys are doing amazing. He would say that in front of the customers, you guys are doing amazing, you're doing a great job, and then he would go, and then like an hour later, you get that disgusting, vulgar email. So I could not stand that guy. So even though, when the district manager tried to do something against the scummy supervisor, and the scummy supervisor sued him on a fraudulent lawsuit, I didn't care at the same time, because it was scumbag versus scumbag. That's the way I personally saw it. It was like two scumbags basically fighting each other. So at that point, I honestly didn't care. I didn't take any sides in that. I didn't care because I just did not like both of them. If you're wondering what happened to the lazy supervisor, how it ended, what happened was the manager could not fire the guy, and he was scared of firing him because of his lawsuit that was pending. And so what happened was the manager was very smart. I will tell you this. My manager that I worked with was intelligent how he got rid of him. Now, how he got rid of him, you could argue was kind of a scummy thing to do. And you guys tell me in the comments if you guys think that this was the right thing to do or the wrong thing to do. But what my manager did to get rid of him, it's a very debatable thing if it was the right thing to do. What he did is he told the lazy supervisor that I will, give you a position in this other store. This other store has a position for assistant manager. So you can move up from supervisor to assistant manager, and you get a pay raise at this store. And that supervisor, remember, the lazy supervisor, he's greedy. He's constantly milking overtime. So the only thing he's thinking about is he's thinking about money. And he says, yeah, I'll do it. And he signs on to be the assistant manager of that other store. Now, once he signs and agrees, the manager has no obligation to take him back. So the manager has no obligation to take him back. So once he's gone, he accepts the position at the other store, the manager has no obligation to take him back. So even if he tries to come back, manager does not have to take him back at that point. And that's how the manager got rid of him, is he basically made him somebody else's problem. And that's what happened, is he made him go to the other store. Now, did this fix problems for us? It did fix problems for us, because we didn't have to deal with him again. And I could start going home at 10 p.m. like everybody else. So I didn't have to get holed up anymore. But at the same time he did the exact same thing at the other store. He would prevent people from doing their work, sabotage them, and just to milk overtime, and then tell them they can't leave when it's 10 p.m. and just hold them up. And for people wondering, why don't you just put him on a morning shift? Because there's a limited amount of supervisors, and you can't always put the guy on a morning shift. So he had a lot of times afternoon shifts on, and he would basically do stuff like that. There was one time I worked where the corporate was so greedy they cut the hours. It was 3 to 10 p.m. 3 to 10 p.m. and it was me and that supervisor. There was nobody else, and I was ringing, and I never seen lines that long. The lines were like super long, and I was with that lazy supervisor, that entire afternoon. It was just terrible. It was disgusting. It was horrible, and it was I basically had to manage like 2 or 3 registers on my own. And if you're wondering how I ran 2 or 3 registers, how I basically did that is I would basically ring up a customer's order really quickly. And what I would tell them is I'd tell them, insert your card. I would hit credit card on the cash register. And then I would run over to the next cash register, which is a few feet over. And I'll be like, oh, I can help you now here too. You come over here, and I'll start ringing them up. And while that the transaction is pending, I would give them a receipt, be here, have a nice day. And then I would do it on the second register. And I'll be going back and forth, and I'll be manning 2 registers in order to get the line down as quickly as possible. And these customers, I will tell you something about them. These customers are so stupid that they don't blame corporate. They don't blame the people at the top for not hiring enough people, because corporate is constantly because retail stores are constantly understaffed because corporate is greedy. Corporate can hire enough staff if they want to, but they're just greedy. The way corporate thinks, they think that one person can do the jobs of 2 or 3 people, and so that's how corporate feels. And so these customers are so stupid that they're taking it out on me. They're thinking like it's my fault that we don't have enough workers when they should be taking up with management. But I got through that night, and it was just brutal working with him. But about the lazy supervisor, what happened to him at that store, he was pulling the exact same crap that he was pulling at my store. And that store called the manager, and was pissed, saying, why did you send this guy over here? This guy is causing so many problems in our store. So basically destroyed relations with that store too. So was what my manager did a good thing or a bad thing? You guys decide in the comments. He basically made it somebody else's problem, but he fixed it for us. So I don't know. I'm not an expert. It is kind of scummy, I will say that. But we didn't have to deal with him anymore, so I guess everybody was happy at our store that we didn't have to deal with him anymore. But it does have a happy ending. I will say this. There is a good ending here, because the guy got fired. Now, how did he get fired? So how he ended up getting fired is he was so lazy that his laziness is what screwed him over. His laziness is what got him fired in the end. What happened was, it was 7 o'clock in the morning. He had a morning shift that he was put on one day. And the registers in the front were not, he didn't bring the drawers down. So the registers had nothing in them. They were empty, so they couldn't, customers couldn't give change. They couldn't do that. I mean, workers couldn't give change to customers. And what happened is, he was just sitting in the office on his phone, not doing anything, and he had to open up the safe and bring the registers down. Now, the door to the office where the safe is, it's like a big steel door. And what happens is, when that door closes, it automatically locks. And then you got to put the key in and, twist it to open up the door. So every time the door closes, it automatically locks. It's automatic lock every single time the door closes. Now, the associate that was the front store cashier had a line building up. He was just sitting in the office, not doing anything. She calls him on the intercom, says, please come up here. I need registers. And he was so lazy that he didn't want to use his key to put in the door. He didn't want to use his key. He was so lazy he couldn't even be bothered to put in his key in the door. That what he did was, he took a cardboard box and he put it in front of the door so that the door would not fully close. And what happened was, there was another worker that was walking by and saw that. And they took out their phone and oh, let me take a picture of this really quick. Let me get this. And they knew what that was. They were going to use that right there to get rid of him. And they took a picture of that. And the reason that he got fired for that, because that was a massive violation. That was something that he could not lie. It was all on camera. That he put the cardboard box in front of the door. That was all in there. That's the office is office, and especially the money area. That is the area that has the most amount of security on it. And so he basically put a cardboard box in front of this door, preventing it from fully closing. Anybody could have opened that door. The safe was open in there. Somebody basically could have robbed thousands of dollars from the store right then and there. So that's how he ended up getting fired. And he got a job as a driver for Coca-Cola. That's basically what he does now, is he drives for Coca-Cola, unless he got fired from that job too. That's the last thing I heard about him is, and I cannot imagine him being a driver for Coca-Cola. I can imagine that he would basically take the longest route possible and just take forever. And then what would happen is, when the Coca-Cola took too long to get delivered to a store, he'd be like, oh, there was traffic, there was an accident. He would always have some kind of ridiculous excuse. Now, moving on to the next thing is, now we're covering another whole topic. We're talking about the graveyard shifts. That's what we're going to be covering. Now, my store is not 24 hours, but we did actually have graveyard shifts. So we had, once a week, we had a night shift once a week. And that night shift was for the truck. It wasn't for the store being open, it was for the truck. So the truck would come in and and stuff would get delivered to the store. Now, I will tell you about the truck nights. Truck nights, I blame truck nights for my back problems. And if you're wondering what's wrong with my back, I don't know what's wrong with my back. But when I stand still for 20 or 30 minutes, if I'm standing still, if I'm constantly walking, I'm not gonna feel any kind of pain. But if I'm I would say standing for 20 or 30 minutes, I get really bad back pain, really bad, where I have to sit down. And this happened to me at the Fallout event when I was at the Good Springs New Vegas event last month. Two of my friends that were with me, Sebi and Chaz, are probably going to see this video. They're going to remember exactly what happened. But I started having back pain because we wanted to go to the Good Springs General Store. And the Good Springs General Store, there's a huge line going to it, and there's nowhere to sit down, nothing. So you're just constantly standing in this long line. And we were standing in line for 2 hours, and 30 minutes in, back started hurting really badly. And how I got through the whole 2 hours, how I ended up getting through that is they had these little kind of logs that were up the road, and I kind of started sitting on those logs, and it was very uncomfortable sitting on those logs, but it was better for me than standing because it just hurt so much. And so I didn't have problems like that when I was younger. I should go to a chiropractor, I really should, and ask them what they think is wrong with me. But basically, I think I'm not a doctor, so I don't know 100%, but I think that some of those back problems I got from truck nights. I think that I got them from graveyard shifts, overnight shifts, because I did so much heavy lifting when I was doing truck nights. And when I did truck nights, we had this belt that was in the floor. And about this belt that was in the floor, you had these really big steel doors that were in the ground. And it looked like carpet, but there was a latch. And you had to pull the latch. And the thing is, you had to put your back into it, and these doors were heavy. They were ridiculous. It was two of them that you had to get open. They were just ridiculous. And it was also scary closing them. Closing them was scary too, because it was like you wanted to close them not to slam it too. So it was also scary closing it because you're scared that you're going to get your fingers caught in it, something like that. But basically, I opened up that belt so many times. And I just hated that, I hated opening that up and carrying all the boxes, but also carrying the U-boats. Now, if you don't know what a U-boat is, we're not talking the German World War II submarines. We're talking U-boats in stores. U-boats, I'll have a picture of it up on the screen. So about U-boats, U-boats are these, they are basically these things that, like, these kind of like carts that have, like, these, basically look just like this, and you would push them. We had those in the basement. And where our stockroom was. The stockroom was in the basement. And so we would have the belt, and we would send the U-boats down. We would disassemble them, and we would send them down. And I hated taking apart that big thing and putting it on the belt. I absolutely hated it, because it was so heavy. That thing was just disgusting. It was ridiculous. I hated putting that thing on the belt. I hated that so much. And the thing is, though, is that we could have left like one or two U-boats on the top floor, because in the top floor we kind of had a back room area near the bathrooms, and we could have just left the U-boats there, some of them, so we didn't have to constantly keep sending them downstairs. But it was, nope, corporate didn't want U-boats in the back room. They only wanted them downstairs, so constantly had to keep bringing those up and down, and lifting all those heavy boxes on truck night will destroy your health, your physical health and your mental health, because these heavy boxes were ridiculous. The worst box in the entire store, the worst one to carry, was the Listerine cases. The Listerine cases were the worst. They were the absolute worst, were the Listerine cases. The Listerine cases had those big jugs of Listerine, and it was like a box like this wide, and it was like just so many jugs of Listerine in there. Picking that up, almost, oh my god, it was just that was ridiculous. And it was like, I would almost always slam it on the floor, drop it on the floor, because I didn't even want to put it down on the floor, because I just didn't want to hold it any longer. But just carrying that into the store was just ridiculous. It was just disgusting, like, you know, doing stuff like that. Even when you put it on the hand truck, even putting it on the hand truck was ridiculous. You know, lifting it, putting it up on the hand truck, then taking it off the hand truck, I hated that. And then the thing about that is trying to, putting the Listerine that was overstock, you had to send it back down. So you had to send it down, and then you had to take the Listerine, and you had to put it all on the shelves downstairs. So that's what I hated the most. I hated the Listerine boxes. But about truck nights, is truck nights were so brutal that it could be the dead of winter. It could be freezing outside, and you will be sweating. Absolutely sweating, because of all the heavy lifting that you are doing. This ridiculous stuff that the ridiculous amount of stuff that you're doing, because you gotta unload this huge heavy truck, and sometimes the truck wasn't that many pallets. Sometimes it was like 6 pallets, but other times it was like 12 or 15 pallets. I think the largest I've seen was like 17 or 18 pallets. So it was like, when it's like that, it's disgusting. And you would think that corporate would put more people on. You would think they would put more people on the shift in order to, that they would put more people on so that the truck nights would be easier. But no, they don't. They think that like one guy can do the jobs of like 3 or 4 people. So you're stuck there doing truck, completely understaffed, and it was just ridiculous. It's just destroying your physical and your mental health working on that. And you would think that if you got, that if you worked on trucks nights, you would think that you would get time and a half, but you don't. You don't get time and a half. You get the exact same pay as somebody in the daytime. And I would tell you something. There was girls that I worked with at my job, and those girls, they never had to work on truck. They never did. The manager never pressured them to work on truck. The manager never told them that they had to work on truck. If they wanted to, I guess they could have, but manager never made them or forced them to work on truck. But a lot of the guys, the manager would get on your case and tell you, you got to do truck. You got to do truck. If it wasn't every week, it was every other week. And basically what happened was, I talked to the manager, and I explained the situation to him, and I told him, and I wasn't the only one who felt this way. Everybody else I talked to felt this way. They felt that we should be getting paid more than the people on the day shift. Now look, I'm not trying to downplay what people are doing in the day shift. I understand they also have a hard job, but I would tell you, I would much rather work in a day shift than having to do that huge truck. That truck night. And the truck nights also mess up your sleeping schedule too. Your sleeping schedule is completely messed up. Is you're gonna wake up, you're gonna go to sleep at night, and you're gonna wake up at night. That's basically how it is with truck nights. So I hated that about truck nights. I hated all the heavy boxes. I hated organizing all that stuff, sending all the overstock down, cleaning up all the boxes, just being extremely understaffed, and I felt like the amount that we're working with that is not fair to the people that are working in day shift, because they don't have to do half that work that we did on truck. So it's not fair to them, and it's not fair to us. And I talked to the manager and I said, listen, can we get time and a half? I'm not saying to cut the people's pay that are working on daytime, but can we get time and a half, just get a little extra, because, we're, putting our backs into it. We're working, we're sweating here. And the manager agreed with me. He said, Patrick, I think you're right. I think you guys do deserve time and a half. I'll try to talk to corporate about it when I'm at the next corporate meeting. And I knew exactly what was going to happen. I knew that this was going to get rejected. I knew that there's no way in hell that corporate is going to approve this. They're never going to accept something like this. And I told the manager, when you talk to corporate and corporate says no, can you please ask them what the incentive is for working on truck if we're not getting time and a half? What is the incentive? Because somebody can work in the daytime and they'll get paid the exact same pay as somebody who works on the truck night. So what is the incentive for working on truck night if we're not going to get time and a half? And he's like, yep, I will ask them that. And that manager was a pretty honest guy, so I do believe that he did ask them that. But about it, the manager comes back to me, a couple days later when I'm working with him, and I asked him, did you talk to corporate about that? He's like, yes. Did we get time and a half? No, I knew it. And I said to him, did you also ask them, what's the incentive for working, truck? And they said the incentive was you get more hours. Oh, yep, that is a great incentive. Yep, you get more hours. You get it. And I will actually comment a little bit more on this later. But yeah, that's the incentive apparently, is destroying your physical health and your mental health working on this huge understaffed truck all night long. And your incentive is that you get more hours. That's your incentive. And I will also tell you this. That one coworker that I talked to you guys about earlier, that he constantly walked out whenever that lazy supervisor held me up. Well, guess what? I worked with him a lot of times on truck nights. He would work pretty much every single truck night. And about that coworker, he was like a spy also in a way, because he would do not tell him anything, because he will absolutely betray you. If you are like, talk bad about a supervisor or something like that, he will, betray you. He will screw you over. So, like, it was never a good idea to talk to him about, like, stuff like that. But also on top of that is he would constantly spy on people. It was, like, a really creepy thing that he did. He wasn't, like, I wouldn't say he was, like, right in the aisle, like, next to you listening. But if he was in the aisle, like, in the other aisle, like, working and you were talking to him, he would pay very close attention to while he was stalking. It's a very creepy thing that he was doing. But about it is, I was working a truck night once. And I was working with that supervisor that I liked, that I talked to you guys about earlier, that had my back when my manager, screwed me over, didn't give me that raise, the first manager. That one coworker that I had, I got sick later in that shift. I don't know what was wrong with me. I don't know. I was just feeling ill. I went to the bathroom, I vomited. I don't know if it was overexhaustion or what it was. I don't know what it was, but I went to the bathroom, I vomited. I cleaned myself up. And I talked to the supervisor and I told him, I don't feel too good. Is it okay if I go home? And he says, it's fine, Pat. You can go home. And the shift was mostly done. It was this was like around, I would say like 5 a.m., maybe like 4 a.m. So there was like 2 or 3 hours left in the shift. Because the shifts, how the overnight shifts usually were, is they were 10 p.m. to like 7 a.m. That's how they usually were. But a lot of times you wouldn't even leave at 7 a.m. You would leave at like 8 or 9 a.m. And so the supervisor said, that's fine, Pat, you can go home. Now, that one coworker who, remember, every single time he would constantly complain to that lazy supervisor and say, because Patrick didn't finish the signs, like, now I can't go home. I can't get home on time. And he would constantly be let go, and I had to stay there, this like over 30 times. He then bursts into the aisle and he says, why does Patrick get to go home? Why does Patrick get to go home early? I want to go home early too. Like, stuff like that. And I didn't argue with him. I was not feeling it. And I walked out. And the supervisor was like, you can just go, Patrick. And I left. Now, a couple days later, when I was feeling better, and I saw that one guy, I saw him in the store, I confronted that coworker. I did. And this is the times when I started standing up for myself and I started becoming more confrontational. And I said to him, and this guy's a narcissist. Like I said, he's a narcissist because I'm convinced he's a narcissist because the world revolves around him. He can never think for anybody else. He can never empathize with anyone else. He only thinks about himself. He thinks he is the top of the world. So I talked to him, and I told him, the other day, I was feeling sick, and you were making a big deal that you weren't able to go home early like me. I was sick. That's why I was going home. And I said, when that lazy supervisor, when he worked with us, every single Saturday night, this happened like over 30 times, you would constantly complain to him, and you would say to him that, oh, I have to go, I have to be places, I can't be here all night. You would make such a big scene, and he would let you go home. And then I was stuck with that lazy supervisor all night long for several hours. And how is that fair to me that the one time I asked to go home early, the one time I'm feeling sick, I asked to go home early for an actual legitimate reason, and you make a big deal of it when you got to leave on time like 30 or more times and I got stuck staying late. If you actually stayed with me, maybe we could have actually gotten more work done and I wouldn't have been staying for like 2 or 3 hours. I probably should have walked out and not listened to that supervisor, but I was pissed at that point because he had gotten to leave so many times on time. He would make such a big deal. The lazy supervisor would let him out. But then the one time I got sick, I was not feeling well, and he was making a big deal why he couldn't go home early like me. And you know what he says to me? You know what the guy says to me? He says to me, Patrick, that supervisor doesn't work here anymore. He got fired at the other store. And it's like it completely went over his head. He doesn't realize, it doesn't matter if he doesn't work here anymore. It doesn't matter. It matters the fact that you got to go home on time constantly, and I constantly had to stay hours and hours, and you left me with that guy. You never stood up for me. You constantly walked out. And it wasn't getting through to him. He didn't seem to understand that. Like, that's how much of a narcissist the guy was. He didn't seem to get that. And now, moving on to the next thing here is talking about the truck drivers. The truck drivers that we had on truck nights. Some of them were great. Others were complete idiots. Like, our store, we had to move all the stuff in through the front door. The front door is where we had to move all of the product in. Because the back parking lot was not enough space for a truck like that to fit. Like, the big truck that's driving, that was not enough room for that truck to unload there. But we had truck drivers who were so stupid, and they say, I always unload in the back. And they would go to the back, even though we told them not to go in the back, and then they would realize they couldn't fit their trucks in the back, and then they would come back around to the front, and that's why we always had it done in the front. We had it done in the front. We would have, like, what we had in the front is we had this little, like, we had kind of like this little, like, a ramp system that we would then send all the totes into the store after we got them off the truck. So we'd have to, pick them all up off the pallet once the pallet was down on the ground. The truck driver had, like, this little elevator thing here. And what happened is the truck driver decided, instead of actually driving, one time there was a truck driver we had, instead of actually parking in the front like we asked him to and lowering the ramp right in front of the store door, do you know what he decided to do? He decided to park at the other end of the parking lot. Like, I don't know why he just decided to park at the other end of the parking lot where there was, like, a bunch of bumps and the road wasn't that even, so there's a little bit of a slant on that parking lot. And what happened is I was actually pulling into the parking lot. The truck actually arrived early, so I was pulling into, like, around 10, and I see, like, boxes is all over the floor. I see boxes, shampoo bottles, food, just, spilled all over the parking lot floor. I'm like, what's going on here exactly? And the supervisor tells me, this nice guy that I worked with again, he tells me that the truck driver insisted on unloading here even though they told him not to. And what happened was the pallet snapped. All this stuff basically fell all over the parking lot. And so what ended up happening was I spent a bunch of time then cleaning it up. My coworkers helped me, but I spent a bunch of time cleaning it up, picking up all the shampoo bottles. Some of the stuff was disgusting, was spilled all over. I wore gloves, picking all that stuff up. And then what happened was the truck driver was bringing on the second pallet, and guess what happened? The second pallet snapped, it fell off the truck elevator, and everything spilled in the parking lot again. It was like a second pallet of stuff. And then what happened was we went around the parking lot, picked all the stuff up, and then what ended up happening, guess what? He brought down the third pallet, and the third pallet snapped. And everything fell all over the parking lot. And then, after wasting hours on just that alone, he said, okay, I'll do what you guys want. I'll park in front of the store. It's like, oh my god, it's like that. But then afterwards, no pallets snapped after that. And the thing is, even after we cleaned everything up, that wasn't the end of it. Because what we had to do is we had to actually take a symbol, which a symbol is like that little kind of like scanning gun thing in retail, and we had to scan all the items out. So they had to all be scanned out that these items had gotten destroyed during delivery. So we had to, because if we didn't scan that out, it would be marked as missing inventory, and then the store loss prevention would basically think that that stuff was stolen. So we had to then take the symbol of every single thing in those totes. Some of the stuff was saved, so not everything was smashed, but a lot of the stuff that was smashed, we had to take the symbol and basically scan it out, and it was just frustrating, dealing with stuff like that. We had one truck driver who he would constantly always give an attitude. He would constantly give an attitude. It's like, can you bring this pallet out first? No, this one first. No. Can you park here? No. And what happened was he got into an argument with the manager once on the phone when he was driving to the store, and what happened is the truck driver got so pissed, He just basically quit and left the truck in like the middle of some, parking lot and just walked off. And he quit like that. He just left the truck there. And we stayed at the store for like another 2 or 3 hours. And I know what some people are thinking. Some people, you got paid for 2 or 3 hours of doing nothing, right? No, we didn't. Because what we were doing is we were facing the store in that time. What facing the store basically means is we were organizing the store, organizing the shelves, vacuuming, the store. So we were, in New York culture, where I grew up in New York, it's, how it is basically you can never stop being busy. It's like, even if you finish all of your tasks, because the manager will always find something for you to do. I had that one supervisor that I said earlier in the story that let me, chill out, but it was always away from the cameras when I did my tasks. But other supervisors and managers weren't like that. They would basically always try to find something for you to do. So we all still had stuff to do. And then we were told, truck's not coming tonight. And then we had to arrive next night and do another night shift that night. So it was not a fun experience. So dealing with those trucks, ugh. But then moving on here, we're talking about that narcissistic coworker again. Basically, that coworker would constantly rush really badly, and he would not rush. He would not rush to do like an excellent job. He would just rush primarily just because he wanted to go home. And sometimes when he rushed, he was so careless that he would put stuff in the wrong place. He would knock stuff over. He would actually accidentally hit people with stuff. There was one of my friends, another coworker of mine, he pushed a U-boat into them once and seriously injured them. But he was just rushing through the aisles so quickly, he wasn't even looking who was in between the aisles, and he pushed a coworker of mine during a night shift. There was one time I actually got injured by him twice. One time what happened was he was just pushing stuff on the belt so much that one of the boxes he didn't put on accurately, and what it did was it rolled off of the belt. Like it was just like that like falling like that, bounce, and it hit me like that. It wasn't like extremely painful, but it still hit me. And I will tell you guys about that coworker, that narcissistic coworker. I got injured by him another time, and this time was much worse. What basically happened was he dropped the handlebar from a U-boat on my foot. I will actually have it up on the screen so you guys see what I got hit by. It looks very similar to this. Now, he didn't drop this at a very considerable height. He dropped this maybe like a few feet, like at the height of a desk. Just think about a desk. That's basically the height that he dropped it at. And it landed right on my foot. Now, thankfully, he did not hit me with the bottom part, the part that actually puts into the U-boat, because that part is actually sharp. Because what happens is, after years of just putting it constantly into the U-boat, what happens is sometimes the metal and stuff like that peels off, so you have like sharp edges on that. So thankfully, I didn't get hit with that. I just got hit with it on the side. But I remember it was 3 o'clock in the morning. Remember the time exactly. I was telling him, don't rush. Please don't rush. Please don't. But nope, he's rushing, and dropped that on my foot. So we were basically sending the U-boat down, the handlebars were getting sent down, and my friend that was actually right above me, he's actually probably going to watch this video, so he'll probably remember this too, but there's another friend of mine at work there. He was right above the belt, because he was sending stuff down to us, and me and that narcissistic guy were taking all the stuff off the belt, and what happened is he dropped that U-boat handle on my foot. Now, when he dropped it on my foot, I screamed at him, and I have very rarely screamed at people in my life, but I've screamed at him. And what happened is, he said to me, first of all, Patrick, you need to stop yelling at me, I'm sorry. And it's like it completely went over his head that, like, he injured me just now. And what happened was, at 5 o'clock in the morning, I went home. So I went home, like, 1 or 2 hours early, and I still toughened it out that shift that day. The pain eventually stopped in my foot, and then when I got home and I took my sock off, my foot was bruised. I noticed that it was bruised, and so what ended up happening is the next day, when I woke up, my entire leg, even though it landed right on the bottom of my foot, my entire leg, it's like I didn't feel it at all. So, like, I could walk. It's not like I was, I wasn't able to walk. I was able to walk, but I couldn't feel it. So it's like if I got hit by anything, if I punched my leg, I would not feel it. So it's like I wasn't feeling anything at all, not pain, nothing. So I could move the leg, but I couldn't feel it. So I don't know what was causing that exactly, but I basically had scheduled an appointment with a doctor and an x-ray. And what ended up doing is I ended up seeing the doctor, but then I ended up trying to go to the x-ray, explain to the doctor what was going on, and the x-ray, I think, was like 5 p.m. or so, and this was on a Friday, and so they told me it was like 4 or 5 p.m. to come in for the x-ray. They scheduled that time, not me, and I come in, and then they tell me that we're closed. X-ray department's closed at this time. It's like, why do you tell me to come in at 4 or 5 p.m. if your x-ray department is closed? Because I remember it was like the afternoon. It was either like 4 or 5 p.m. But anyways, I was able to schedule an x-ray appointment, an X-ray with a the same company but a different clinic that still had it open on in another town. And so I went there, I got the X-ray, I had it sent over to the doctor, and the doctor got back to me. He gave me like a small little cast thing to actually put over my foot, but I didn't really need it. I didn't need to put it in. But I talked to the pharmacist. This was actually one of the nicer pharmacists that I had later on. I talked to the pharmacist and I explained to him my injury. And I said to him at my job, like, do you know why I'm not feeling anything in my leg? And he basically says to me, just might be your nerves acting up. I don't know how true that is, but that is basically what he told me. And the doctor called me back a couple days later. He told me there's no broken bones. So I'm fine, guys. There was nothing. The injury could have been a lot worse. I don't know how I didn't break any bones. It's a miracle. It's honestly a miracle. That nothing got broken. So I thank God or any kind of luck that I had that nothing got broken. But that could have been a lot worse. So I was just very lucky in that, very fortunate in that. But what ended up happening is after a couple days, I was able to feel my leg again. So my leg was fine again. I was able to walk normally, which I was before, but just didn't feel anything. But now I could, walk fully, and I could feel my leg as I'm walking. And I'll tell you something: walking when you don't feel, it's like one of the weirdest things ever. It just feels so weird if you're walking when you don't feel it. But anyways, everything was fine. And one of my friends told me that I could probably get workman's comp, but the friend who actually witnessed this, he told me that I could probably get workman's comp, which is apparently compensation when you get hurt, but I didn't end up going for it. And the reason I didn't end up going for it is because I didn't have any broken bones, so I felt that my case was going to be kind of weak. And at that point, I didn't want to start causing drama. And also, even though I really didn't like that guy that I worked with, I didn't want to get him fired. I didn't. I didn't want to get him fired. And the reason I didn't want to get him fired is because that guy who injured me, he went through some bad stuff in his life early on. And obviously doesn't excuse his terrible behavior, but, he was sick at one point. He was very ill. He did end up making a recovery. And also, on top of that, is his father actually died in an accident. And so that was years before. But to an extent, I felt bad for the guy. So he was always, a narcissistic guy, a very arrogant guy. But, and what I'll say about this ultimately is, my heart goes out to you, but you can't treat people like this. You can't be rude like this to people. You can't be nasty like this to people. I'm sorry about what, happened to your father. I'm sorry about the things that you went through. But, you can't take it out on the people. I never caused you problems. I was never rude to him. So that's ultimately why I didn't file workman's comp, because I was scared he would get fired, and I didn't want to get, him in trouble. But I did actually get him written up. That did happen. So what happened with him getting written up is I talked to the manager. And when the manager came in, the manager basically said, did everything go good on truck, last night? And he told the manager, yep, everything went fine. Everything went great. And the manager didn't question it anymore. And I told him, did he tell you that he dropped the handle from the U-boat on me? And he's like, no, he didn't. And he wrote him up. I actually saw my manager actually take out the paper and write him up right there, so he got written up for that. And then he came and issued me an apology, another one. But I felt like that was just because of the write-up. And I will say this is, I don't want anyone getting in trouble. The only thing I wanted is a sorry. That was it. I just wanted a sorry. That was it ultimately. But I don't know. I like my friend, my friend that I worked with, he still works for the company, so he's still there, years later, but he works at a different store now. But he's told me several times I should have done workman's comp, but I don't know. So I'm gonna probably talk to him again after this video is posted. But like I said, I didn't want to get get the guy fired. I didn't want anyone to get fired. Even it was his fault. I still didn't want anybody to get fired. And what I will tell, ultimately, what I'll say about that guy is the number one thing that he did that pissed me off. The worst thing that he did, that coworker that I was talking about, that really narcissistic coworker, the worst thing he did, it's not even injuring me. It's not even all the rude and nasty behavior. The worst thing he did was that friend of mine that witnessed me getting hurt. What happened was, him and his wife owned a food truck. So they had they had the business, and they would also work there. So they would both work there, to get some extra cash. And from their food truck, they would make hot dogs. They would make beef sandwiches, stuff like that. And what happened is, we had this tradition when we worked on a truck night, and the tradition went on for years. And what the tradition basically is every single week, somebody else would bring in food for everybody. That's how it would work. So, one week, it was you who would bring in food for everybody. And if you did not cook, you would order food for everybody. And the thing is, people were never forced to participate in this, but if you were not participating in this, then you would typically not ask for food from other people. You just say, I'm not buying food for anybody, and I'm not taking food from anybody. That's just it. That's what you would basically be like, which is a total fine position to have. But what the guy ended up doing is the guy and his wife brought in sandwiches for people, sandwiches, hot dogs, stuff like that. And what happened was that coworker that was really rude and nasty would constantly always take a sandwich. He would always take a hot dog, always take a sandwich. Whenever anybody would bring something in, pizza, he would constantly eat it, constantly take it. And nobody really ever stopped him, which maybe we should have told him. But what happened is he never brought in food for anybody. In 6 years of working with him, I have never seen him bring in food, never cook food, never buy food for anybody, never. It's never happened. Never, ever. And that's gone on for years and years and years. There is not one time. And the thing about this is, whenever he would go on his break and he would buy something, whenever he would open up his wallet, he had like a fat stack of cash inside the wallet. Like, it was like so much cash in there. And I don't know if he was trying to show off or what he was doing. It's stupid carrying all that much cash in the wallet, but it's clear that he has money. So it's like if you're not going to buy food for people, okay, that's fine. If you're not going to bring in food for people, okay, that's fine. But don't eat the food that people bring in. And that's what honestly pissed me off the most. That pissed me off because it's selfish behavior. It's like, you're never going to give anybody anything else, but you're going to constantly take from people. That pissed me off the most. And that was pissing off my friend really badly. He got pissed. Because it was like he was bringing in food. It was his food that him and his wife cooked from their food truck, bringing in for us. And this guy was just constantly never brought in food for anybody, and he was just constantly, constantly just taking the food. Me personally, I never cooked. If I did bring in food for people, I would make sandwiches for people, or I would just order pizza. That's typically what I did. I would order pizza, or I would bring in sandwiches for people. I'm usually I'm not a good cook, but I would always bring in food, or bring in sandwiches, or order pizza. I would order food typically more than I would make it, but I would always honor the tradition. But that guy wouldn't, and that pissed us off. And what happened was, we talked to the manager about this. We should have confronted him directly, but we talked to the manager about this. And now, I didn't want to be like the snitch guy. It took me a long time to tell the manager about this, a long time, because I'm not the type of person to start drama. I'm not the person to talk to the manager. I didn't want to, do stuff like this. But it was it took some time. Eventually, I did tell the manager. And when I did tell the manager, he talked to the guy, and he basically apologized to us, and then he would do the exact same thing next week. The next week, he would do the same thing. He would start taking food, never bringing food again, and we just basically got pissed. And we talked to the manager again. We basically told the manager, we're at our limits at this point. We're getting it's getting ridiculous. And the manager was not the type of guy that wanted, conflict. He was always trying to avoid it as much as possible, which is also a good thing, but sometimes you need to be much more aggressive with some people that are, being way too pushy and taking advantage of people. And that guy would always work on truck night. He would always want to work every single truck night, and so that's probably why the manager was hesitant to actually confront him. But I remember one night that I was working, and this is the final night that my friend had worked there. This is the final night that he worked at that store, because he ended up going to another store to work. It was the same company, but he ended up going to another store. The final night that he worked there, that one coworker, who was the narcissist, the really arrogant guy, he walked up to me and my friend, and he said to us, like, are you guys thirsty? Do you want me to buy you drinks? We're not talking alcohol. We're just talking, drinks from the fridge. And he wanted to, buy us drinks from the fridge. And I thought that was extremely weird. Really, really weird. Like, I just, something was just clicking in my head. I knew that there was something off. I knew there was something wrong, because I'd known this guy for years, and he never did something like that. He never, ever bought food for anybody. He never did that. So I felt that there was something wrong. There was something off. We go up to the counter, and I tell him, wow, I mean, you've changed. You've bought us something for once. I actually said that to him. And you know what he said? He looked at me, and he said, no, I didn't buy this. The manager gave me $20, and he told me to buy you guys drinks. That's what he said. So that's the type of attitude that he has. He was even brutally honest about that. He was like, no, this isn't me. The manager gave me $20 and told me to buy you guys stuff. So the manager gave him $20, and the manager was hoping that we would be more friendly with each other, thinking that he bought us drinks, but he didn't. But because of his big mouth, he basically said that. And my friend, I remember, that was up there with me, he looked at me, and he basically said, Pat, I'm done. And he just walked out. And that was it. He never worked there again. He ended up getting a job at the same company, but another store. So he transferred to another store that wasn't too far from that one. And what happened was when the supervisor that night found out that my friend had left, the supervisor was having a temper tantrum. She was freaking out. She didn't understand the whole story. She didn't know what basically had happened, but she was getting pissed. And then what ended up happening was that arrogant coworker who basically said about the $20 manager gave him, he confronted me in an aisle when I was unpacking stuff. And he says to me, he's like, Patrick, what is your problem with me? That's what he says. And I said to him, you know what my problem is with you? I've worked with you for years. I worked with you for 5 years, because it was 5 years at that point when he did that. And in those 5 years that I've worked with you, you constantly eat food that other people bring in. You constantly do that. Whenever people bring in food, you constantly eat it. But you've never cooked food for anybody. You've never bought food for anybody, but you dare eat other people's food. And you've done this for, years. And you know what he says? He says to me, so? It's like, oh man, honestly, this is the point where I start dropping F-bombs. Like, I didn't start cursing at him, but I walked away. I was just so disgusted. I did not want to talk to him anymore. I was just like that. Like, he couldn't even wrap it into his head that it was wrong what he did. Like I said, this was one of the most narcissistic people I knew, because it was always, world would always revolve around him. It was always, he was the top of the world. He was the most important. His, problems were the most important. Screw everybody else, I'm most important. And he couldn't wrap around his head that he was hurting other people, screwing other people by like doing stuff like this, taking advantage of other people. He couldn't wrap it around his head that he was doing stuff like this. But that was that. And what ended up happening is I just did not want to talk to that guy. I know other people would have basically lost it at that point, but I was so disgusted. I didn't want to talk to him, and I basically just ignored him for the rest of the night. And the last year that I worked there, I never really had much interaction with him. But what happened was my manager, even though he was a really nice guy, but my manager blamed my friend for walking out and said that that he was the one who chose to walk out. He chose to leave. He made the decision to leave. He left us empty-handed. And I told the manager, I was like, did you give him $20 to basically buy us drinks to make it seem like he's nice? Like he's changed? And the manager was like, no, I didn't do that. It was just my turn this week to buy food. And it wasn't his turn to buy this food this week. It wasn't. So it was basically, he was just trying to downplay it when in reality, I don't believe that. I believe he gave him the $20 on purpose to try to patch up relations with us, because he knew that the guy was never going to buy us food. He knew it. He knew he was never going to buy us food, and he was going to keep, eating food. But that just honestly just pissed me off. And then I'm also going to talk about my other coworker. I had another coworker that I worked with in retail, and this guy, I worked with him on night shifts too. He was common on night shifts. He was really annoying too, but he was annoying in a different way. Now, this other coworker that I worked with, he was nice. He didn't have the attitude that the other coworker had. He didn't really necessarily take advantage of people like that. But the reason he was annoying is because he wouldn't stop talking. That's precisely what. And I never thought I would call somebody annoying for never ending their talk, but that's exactly what he was. What he basically did is he would, every single night when we worked in retail, he would find something really stupid to find a conversation about. Like when he was ringing up customers, he would always be the slowest to ring customers up, and he would have this giant line because he would go into this long stories with customers. So like even if customers only had like one item, he would go into some long discussion with customers about something ridiculous. Like the most ridiculous thing that I've heard is a customer that was buying a Three Musketeer bar once, and he was talking about the history of the Three Musketeers company. I'm not joking. Like literally, this is what this guy would do, is he would constantly talk. He would talk nonsense. He would find something ridiculous to talk about. Something stupid. He would start talking long about the weather, or he would start talking about the food or what they're buying or how their day is, but he would go way into it way too much. He would spend like more than 5 minutes on each customer, which is way more than enough time. And he apparently worked at Geico. He used to sell insurance before he worked in retail, and he got fired from Geico. And I asked him why he got fired from Geico. He told me that he got fired for being too nice, which is, how do you get fired for being too nice? No, he got fired because he wasted time. He talked to customers about a bunch of nonsense. That's probably what ended up happening. Now, when I worked with him on the night shifts, it was the worst. Because what he would do is he had his little cart that he would push around, and on his cart he would have his phone on speaker. So he wouldn't even have earbuds. He would have his phone on speaker, and he would constantly play those late night comedian talk show hosts like Jimmy Kimmel. He'd play Jimmy Kimmel with Samantha Bee and Conan like all night long. It's like he would play them like constantly, like, really loud. It was just super annoying. And what he did was if he was unpacking with you in the exact same aisle, he would somehow find it to bring up politics. Like whatever Jimmy Kimmel talks a lot of politics. Whenever Jimmy Kimmel was bringing that up or something like that, he would start talking politics to you and like telling you how are you going to vote and like asking you about your voting preferences and stuff like that. Like this being pushy about this. And I'm not in the mood for this. I don't want to talk about this stuff. I want to get my night shift done and go home. If you're going to talk to me about something, I don't mind talking with my coworkers to pass the time, but if you're going to talk to me about something, at least talk to me about something that's not divisive. Politics. Talk to me something like latest video game, or, you know, maybe some ridiculous customer story, because we like talking to our coworkers about something ridiculous that happened in the store or something like that. But don't talk about, like, you know, politics. Don't talk about telling me who I should vote for or what. I'm not telling, and also I'm not getting involved in politics here, guys. I'm not saying what Jimmy Kimmel is saying is right or wrong. But I'm just saying is he would constantly bring up Jimmy Kimmel's politics, and it was so infuriating. It was so annoying. I didn't want to listen to that guy. And honestly, it made me despise Jimmy Kimmel just because I constantly kept hearing him all night long, just because of that that he would constantly play it on his speaker. And the other really annoying thing that he did is he screwed me over on Thanksgiving, because at my store, what happened was, whenever at my store, the policy was that at the end of the year, when you had like Thanksgiving, New Year's Eve, and Christmas, the policy was you had to work one holiday. So you either work Thanksgiving, Christmas, or New Year's Eve. And if you worked one of the holidays, you were not obligated to work the other holidays. And I wasn't necessarily against that system, because the store was open that day. And so if you work one holiday, you don't have to work the other holidays. So I didn't really have much of an issue with it personally. But what happened was, I worked every single Thanksgiving for 4 or 5 years. I worked every single Thanksgiving. And the reason I worked Thanksgiving is because the store was empty, and there was really not much to do, and, you know, I got paid double basically for working that day, and I didn't have to work Christmas, because I didn't want to work Christmas Eve, and I didn't want to work New Year's Day or New Year's Eve. So I didn't want to work those days. And so the manager respected that. I would work Thanksgiving, and I didn't have to work the other, you know, holidays at the end of the year. But what happened was, there was one year where my mom told me, you know, I'm going to make a big dinner this year. Would you like to work, you know, would you skip working Thanksgiving this year? And I told my mom, I'll talk to my manager about it. Now, what happened was, my manager was asking me to cover a bunch of shifts. There was a bunch of coworkers that I had that were constantly calling out, not covering shifts, and not covering their own shift. And so my manager was asking me to cover these shifts. And I told my manager, I'll make a deal with you. I'll cover these shifts, like there was like 2 or 3 shifts. But in exchange for me covering these extra shifts, you will not put me on Thanksgiving, on Christmas Day, Christmas Eve, New Year's Eve, or New Year's Day if I work these extra shifts for you. And my manager said, deal. We have a deal. And my manager honored the deal. He did. So he didn't screw me out of that. But what happened was, when I wasn't working Thanksgiving, and I had my dinner with my family. And while I was in the middle of dinner with my family, he starts texting me. And he tells me during that, he says to me, Pat, can you please cover for me? I have somewhere to go. I'm really sick. I cannot work today. And I said to him, it's like, Mike, I requested off today. He's like, please, can you help me out here? And you know what he says to me? He says to me that I called everyone else. I texted everyone else. They're not they're not responding, or they said they can't. Can you please cover for me? It would I would owe you a lot. Now, me being the really nice guy that I am, I shouldn't have done that. I shouldn't have, because the thing is he was annoying. This guy was annoying, but he never really screwed me over. So even though he was annoying, he never really screwed me over. And I was like, okay, fine, I'll do you this favor. I'll work for you. And what happened is, I worked at Thanksgiving, and then what ended up happening is, when I actually came back to work after a few days after that, my coworkers were saying to me, Pat, why did you work on Thanksgiving? And it's like, you know, he needed me to work for him. And they said, all my coworkers told me, he pulls this stuff all the time. He always says he has something important to do. He's sick. He always does that to get at the holidays. He just didn't want to work on the holiday. I was like, are you serious? Are you kidding me? And it was like, so he wasn't apparently sick. He just basically guilt-tripped me into helping him. And what happened was, one of my friends who was a supervisor at the store, he was still working there. A year after I quit, he was working there still. And I texted him that week of Thanksgiving, and I told him that that guy might try to call out on Thanksgiving. And he told me, thank you, Pat. Thank you for telling me that. I appreciate that. And he told me that it happened, that he tried to call out on Thanksgiving. Now, I don't know if he did call out on Thanksgiving or not, but basically that's not fair. that I was working, you know, the Thanksgiving every year, and I had specifically asked for that day off, and he guilt tripped me. So he's gonna constantly keep. He felt like he didn't need to work on those days, not on any holiday. So he wouldn't work on any holiday afterwards, and other people were forced to come in. So that's what I'll say about that. Is I don't like people normally working on holidays, but it's very dishonest when you lie to people that you're sick to make another person go in on a holiday when you just don't want to work on a holiday. And my friend actually ended up quitting. My supervisor friend ended up quitting because of this guy. Because what happened was there was a customer that was being annoying to him one day, and that same guy was talking nonsense to him. So he was just, you know how I told you, he just constantly talks and doesn't stop talking? He was talking nonsense to him, and there was a customer that was being rude to him at the same time. And then he said, you know what? Screw this. You guys deal with this on your own. I'm done. And just walked out. And so he just left the customer and left the guy there and just walked out. And that's I know how my buddy quit there. But that's pretty much it. What I was talking about, you know, closing shifts and graveyard truck shifts. That's just basically a lot of the horror stories. And for people wondering, I'm not gonna make another one of these videos because I pretty much covered most of these stories. I know you guys like watching these, when I, you know, cover these stories. I talk about this stuff, all this from the heart. I haven't used a script, so I'm just explaining how it was. The only last thing I'll say about this here is that the last few months that I was working in retail. Do you know what I did? I did something for the first time that I never did in retail. I lied. I lied to management. And what I did was, when I lied to management, is I would tell the manager, I'm going outside to get carts. And the reason I would tell the manager that is manager would never question it when I was going out to get carts. I would do that just so I had a breathing room, just so I didn't have to be in the store, because I didn't want to be in the store with the supervisors and the customers, the rude customers. I just wanted a break. And sometimes some of these carts were like far. Like some of these carts were like, you know, even half a mile away. I don't know why people brought them so far from the store, but people sometimes did. And I honestly, walking half a mile to get a cart, I actually preferred doing that over actually being in the store. But a lot of times what I would do is I would actually just, there was actually a store that was actually like a few blocks away and had like this big staircase. And what I would do is I would actually just walk away from the store, like walk a few blocks, and actually just sit down on that staircase. And I would just be on my phone for like 20 minutes. That's what I would just constantly do that. And then what I would do is I would just bring the carts, and then I would just tell the manager, oh, the carts were like really far away. And I would just do that just to kill time. And the reason I never did that before, I only did that the last few months of working in retail, because I just felt so disrespected by the company. I felt so disrespected that, you know, by some of my coworkers that took advantage of me. I felt so disrespected by some of the management. I felt like my raise was denied. I asked for a higher raise. My raise was denied. I got pissed about that, and I basically felt that if if you don't value me, I don't value you as a company too. You know, it works both ways. You're gonna screw me over. You know, I guess I'm gonna do the same thing too now. So I never did something like that before. Basically, it encouraged me to be lazy. Basically, that final part, because I was constantly going above and beyond, helping people out, but helping the company out a lot, and I felt disrespected by the company. And that's what I'll say is that going above and beyond is not always the best thing to do, because going above and beyond a lot of times isn't going to get you a promotion. It's not going to get you a raise. All it's basically going to do is get you more work. And that's what a lot of people don't understand. Is I'm not telling people to be lazy, but I would tell people is just follow your job description. That's it. Follow your job description. So, you know, don't do stuff outside your job description. There's no need to go above and beyond if you don't think you're going to get a raise. Only go above and beyond if you feel like you're going to get a raise. If you feel like your management is going to truly help you out and give you a raise and promotion, then you can go above and beyond. But if you're not getting anything out of it, don't bother then. That's what I would say. Just do your job description. Don't do less than your job description, because then they'll get on your case. But if they do get on your case, just say, listen, I followed the job description. I'm doing my job description. I don't have an obligation to do this. My shift ends at 10 p.m. My shift ends at 4 p.m. whenever it ends, and I'm leaving when my shift ends. That's basically it. They will try to hold you up. They'll try to force you to stay longer, but you have no obligation to do so. But that's pretty much it for this video, guys. Let me know what you guys think of this, all my horror stories here. Thank you guys for watching. I hope that you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, drop a like, and I'll see you guys on the next one. Take care, everyone. Have a wonderful day, guys.